Imagine lying in bed at night, your body tired but your mind spinning like a broken record. Thoughts keep coming, worries, regrets, plans, what-ifs, and no matter how much you toss and turn, sleep feels far away. You close your eyes, hoping for rest, but instead you get noise, mental noise. Now tell me the truth. How many nights have you spent wide awake, stuck in your head, wishing for silence that never comes? The way you end your day is just as important as how you start it. If you go to bed with a restless mind, you carry that stress into your sleep. But if you slow down, let go, and create the right mental space, sleep becomes natural, deep, and healing. Tonight, you're going to discover ancient Buddhist practices that will help you quiet the mind, release inner tension, and fall asleep in peace. These aren't just bedtime tips. They are timeless tools used by monks, meditators, and seekers for thousands of years, and now they're yours. So get ready. Because after this video, your nights and your inner world will never be the same again. Before we begin, I want you to make a promise to yourself. Write in the comments. Starting tonight, I choose peace. I choose silence. I am calm. You're not just writing words, you're sending a message to your mind, to your nervous system, to your heart. Enough noise, it's time for stillness. So go ahead, type it now, and let's begin this journey together. There's something deeply painful about lying in the dark with a busy mind. The world is quiet, yet your thoughts are louder than ever. The room is still, but your chest feels heavy. You want rest. You need peace. But somehow, you can't seem to cross that invisible threshold between wakefulness and sleep. You've done everything. Turned off your phone, adjusted your pillow, slowed your breath, and yet the noise remains. Why is it so hard to let go? Because the problem isn't just physical. It's not about your mattress or the position of your blanket. The real struggle is mental. It's the need for control, the craving for sleep itself, the fear of not falling asleep that builds pressure and keeps the mind restless. And here is where one of the deepest teachings in Buddhist psychology can help. Not by forcing sleep, but by shifting how we relate to it. The Abhidhamma, the detailed analysis of the mind found in early Buddhist texts, offers a unique tool called Upekkha Paccaya, a mental condition rooted in equanimity. This is not the kind of equanimity that means apathy or detachment in a cold sense. It's the gentle, balanced awareness that allows the mind to stay calm without clinging. It doesn't push anything away, and it doesn't hold anything tightly. It is the quiet confidence that things will unfold as they should, without the need for force. Equanimity is not just an emotion. In the Abhidhamma, it is a mental factor that serves as a condition, a foundation that supports other wholesome mental states. It works like healthy soil. You don't see it when looking at the flower, but without it, the flower wouldn't grow. In the context of sleep, Upekkha Paccaya means creating mental conditions that are free from the push and pull of craving and aversion, the very forces that disturb sleep the most. When people lie awake at night, they are usually caught in some form of struggle. They crave rest. They fear being tired tomorrow. They resist the presence of thought. They long for silence and hate the noise. Every one of these reactions is a condition for more agitation. Even the simple thought, "I hope I fall asleep soon," is a subtle form of grasping. It is a seed of tension. The harder you want sleep, the more you resist the present moment, and the less sleep comes. Equanimity changes the entire game. Instead of trying to fall asleep, you learn to simply be. You replace striving with awareness, urgency with patience, grasping with letting go. And in doing so, you create a mental space where sleep can happen naturally. Not because you forced it, but because nothing is standing in its way. This is not about technique, it's about your inner attitude. Upekkha helps develop a mindset that says, even if I don't sleep right away, I'm okay. Even if my mind is active, I don't have to fight it. I don't have to control everything. I can let this night unfold as it will without anxiety. But how is that possible? How do we stop ourselves from caring so much about whether or not we fall asleep? It starts with understanding that equanimity is built, not chosen in a single moment. In the Abhidhamma framework, mental conditions arise based on other mental conditions. That means equanimity won't just appear because we decide to feel calm. It arises because we create the right mental environment for it. And that environment is built through consistent inner habits. One way to develop that environment is to change the relationship you have with your thoughts at night. Most people either get caught in their thoughts or try to shut them down, but equanimity does neither. Instead, it observes thoughts as passing events, like wind through a tree. The wind moves, the tree doesn't panic. It sways, it adjusts, but it doesn't resist. This is what it means to be mentally balanced. You practice this by noticing a thought. Say, "What if I can't sleep again?" and simply acknowledging it without trying to answer it. Let it pass. Don't follow it. Don't fight it. Just let it be there, like a cloud drifting across the sky. This is mental balance in action, and with time, it becomes your natural state. The noise loses its power over you because you stop feeding it your attention. Equanimity also requires trust, not in a religious sense, but a deep confidence that the body knows how to rest. Sleep is not something you do. It's something that happens when the right conditions are present. Think of it like floating. If you try to float by thrashing around, you sink. But if you release control, the water holds you. The same is true for rest. There's also an important connection between upekkha and the letting go of identity. Much of our anxiety around sleep comes from the idea that I need to be well rested to perform, to prove, to function. This is ego in disguise. It makes rest conditional on success. But when we let go of identity, even for a few minutes before bed, we become more like monks in the forest, content with the simplicity of awareness itself. We don't need anything extra. We are enough as we are. One of the most beautiful aspects of equanimity is that it treats all experiences with the same gentle attention. Whether the mind is quiet or busy, whether the body is relaxed or tense, equanimity says, let this be enough. It doesn't mean you won't make wise choices, like keeping a calm environment or limiting screens, but it means that even when things aren't perfect, your peace isn't shaken. And that is real freedom. When your peace no longer depends on the outside world matching your preferences. To apply this before bed, begin by taking a few quiet breaths and softly reminding yourself, I don't need to control this night. I just need to let it happen. Let this sentence be your mantra. Not something to chant with effort, but a gentle internal message that your nervous system can understand. Repeat it when the thoughts rise. Whisper it mentally when doubt appears. Let it soak into your awareness until it becomes your default setting. You can also train equanimity through reflection. As you lie in bed, think back to your day. Notice the highs and lows. Then try to view them all with the same balanced mind. That was good. That was painful. But both have passed. Watch how the heart softens when you treat each moment with equality. This practice dissolves the need to cling to pleasure or push away pain, both of which are enemies of rest. And yes, equanimity might feel distant at first, especially if your nights are full of mental chaos. But that's okay. You don't need perfect calm to begin. You only need the willingness to stay, to observe, and to release control. Over time, your mind learns that it's safe to settle. It doesn't have to be on guard all the time. It doesn't have to plan, rehearse, analyze, or fix everything. It can just be. Even physically, you'll notice a shift. The muscles soften, the jaw relaxes, the breath becomes slower without trying. These are signs that equanimity is working, not as a technique, but as a condition. Something deeper than relaxation. Something that allows peace to arise because nothing is in its way. And it's important to understand that equanimity does not mean indifference. You are not trying to stop caring. You are learning to care wisely, to care without fear, to rest in the truth that what happens is not always in your control, but how you meet it, with a soft mind, with a steady heart, that is always yours. This is the strength of Upekkha Pakaya. It's not about suppressing your thoughts or pretending everything is fine. It's about welcoming each moment with balance, with stillness, with the quiet strength of someone who has stopped resisting life. And from this place, sleep becomes not a goal to chase, but a gift that arrives naturally when the mind is ready to receive it. If you've ever had a night where sleep came unexpectedly, perhaps during a peaceful drive, or a gentle rain, or after a conversation that soothed your heart, that was equanimity in action. There was no pressure, no striving, just presence, and the mind, finally unburdened, allowed the body to rest. That same experience can be cultivated intentionally, through daily reflection, through mental training, through gentle surrender, and through the consistent practice of letting go of the need for any specific result. This is the secret that few people understand. Most sleep issues are not problems of the body, but of the mind trying too hard to make something happen. The more you chase sleep, the more it runs. But when you stop chasing, when you sit quietly at the center of your being and allow things to be as they are, sleep returns. Not because you summoned it, but because you finally got out of its way. So tonight, try something different. Not another breathing trick, not another sleep app. Just this. Rest in the knowing that you are not in charge of everything. You don't have to hold it all together. You don't have to earn peace. You only have to allow it. Breathe softly. Let the thoughts float past like birds in a sky too wide to hold them. And remember, the calmer you become about needing sleep, the easier it comes. Let that be your practice tonight. Not fixing, not trying, just allowing. Let equanimity be your pillow. Let awareness be your blanket. Let stillness be enough. And in that space of balanced surrender, may you find the rest you've been searching for all along. And just like that, in the space between letting go and doing nothing, something subtle starts to awaken inside you. A quiet presence, a still backdrop behind the noise. It's not loud, it's not demanding, but it's always been there. Most people never notice it. Yet for those who do, it becomes a doorway, an entry point to deeper silence than the mind can ever create. There's a sound that's not really a sound. It doesn't come from outside. It isn't created by movement or machines. You don't hear it with your ears in the usual way. It's an internal hum, a kind of vibrational presence. And once you learn how to notice it, it can guide you into some of the deepest states of peace you've ever known. This inner hum, called nada in certain Buddhist and yogic traditions, is not a metaphor. It's an actual experience, subtle, faint, but unmistakable once you're still enough. It has been described in both Theravada and Tibetan lineages as a kind of natural resonance that becomes clearer when the mind grows silent. Not everyone hears it the same way. For some, it's a soft ringing. For others, a faint high tone or a whispering pressure in the background of awareness. But its nature is the same. It arises from stillness and leads back into stillness. To access it, you must first understand that it's not something you create. You can't force it. It's already there. What blocks it is distraction, thinking, straining, the habit of directing attention outward. But when the mind turns inward, not toward thoughts, but toward pure perception, this sound can become vivid, and the more you rest with it, the deeper your mind begins to settle. Unlike music or external soundscapes, the nada does not stimulate the brain. It doesn't create more mental activity. In fact, it draws awareness away from surface-level thinking and back toward the ground of being. This is why it becomes such a powerful gateway into meditative absorption. It gives the restless mind something to stay with, something subtle enough to quiet thought, but real enough to hold attention. If you've ever sat in total silence and noticed a high-pitched tone with no source, you've already touched the edge of this experience. But most people ignore it or think it's just the result of silence itself. What they don't realize is that it's an invitation, a kind of whisper from deep inside, a guide to something far more peaceful than ordinary silence. In deep meditation, especially in jhana practice, the nada can become a central object. It requires refined attention, but once established, it can support extended periods of inward stillness without boredom or struggle. The key is to listen with awareness, not for sound. You're not looking for something new. You're becoming intimate with what's already present, but hidden beneath noise. One of the ways to develop this sensitivity is through gentle withdrawal of attention from the senses before sleep. This doesn't mean shutting off awareness completely. It means relaxing the active engagement with sights, sounds, thoughts, and sensations. As attention turns inward, the gross becomes quiet, and the subtle starts to appear. It helps to lie still, eyes closed, in a dark, quiet space. Let the breath be natural. Don't focus on the breath or thoughts. Instead, let awareness expand, not downward into heaviness, but inward into space. Soften behind the ears, release the tongue, Feel the body dissolve into the background, and somewhere in that openness you may begin to notice the faint tone, like a thread connecting you to a dimension beyond thinking. Don't grab it. Don't evaluate it. Just rest with it. Follow it with the same softness you'd use to feel a breeze on your skin. It won't take you deeper if you force it, but if you let it lead you, the mind begins to quiet without effort. There are teachings in some forest meditation traditions that point to this sound as the beginning of subtle energy perception, not in a mystical or esoteric way, but as a natural consequence of withdrawing the senses and refining attention. As gross stimuli fade, what remains is vibration, what some call the sound of consciousness itself. In Tibetan Dzogchen practices, a similar phenomenon is sometimes described as a sign of the mind returning to its ground. It's not an object of attachment or a goal, but it becomes useful when it helps the practitioner abide in non-conceptual awareness. It's not the final destination, but a stepping stone into the vastness of silence beyond all forms. When used properly, this sound becomes a kind of background anchor. It doesn't demand your focus like a mantra. It doesn't stimulate thought like guided visualizations. Instead, it supports a gentle, open awareness. It allows the nervous system to shift out of active mode into deep rest. The very act of listening to it with non-grasping attention retrains the mind to be receptive rather than reactive. Over time, something interesting begins to happen. As your familiarity with this inner hum grows, you'll notice it appearing even during the day, in quiet moments or during meditation. It becomes a kind of compass, gently pointing inward, reminding you of the silent dimension underneath activity. And here's the secret. That hum is not separate from you. It's not something out there that you tune into. It is a reflection of your own presence, your own stillness, resonating in a way that the senses can faintly recognize, the sound of your being. Some ancient texts refer to this as the sound of emptiness, not in the sense of a void, but in the sense of a space so open, so undisturbed, that its nature expresses itself in the simplest possible form, a vibration without cause. It's not a symbol, it's not an idea, it's experience, as direct as breath or sensation, but subtler than both. In practical terms, following this sound helps release the mind from the surface level of identity. You stop being the thinker. You stop being the one who's trying to sleep, trying to meditate, trying to understand. Instead, awareness rests in itself. The hum continues, the mind quiets, the body softens. Sleep often follows, not because you were trying, but because you returned to the natural rhythm beneath your usual restlessness. This is what makes it such a powerful gateway to peace, not just the peace of sleep, but the peace of presence, the peace that doesn't depend on silence in the room or stillness in the body, the peace that exists when the seeking stops and the listening begins. If you find the sound hard to notice at first, don't worry. It's not about talent, it's about sensitivity. And sensitivity grows with stillness. The less you strain to hear it, the clearer it becomes. You might start by sitting quietly during the day, letting the senses rest, and simply being curious. Let the mind settle. Let the attention soften. Don't analyze what you're hearing. Just be open. This kind of listening becomes a training in surrender. Not the surrender of giving up, but the surrender of allowing. Letting awareness lead instead of ego. letting experience unfold instead of forcing results, letting the subtle guide the gross. That reversal alone is enough to change your entire relationship with rest, with meditation, with life. And there's something else that happens when you listen to this sound over time. The fear of silence dissolves. Most people are afraid of true silence because they associate it with emptiness, loneliness, or loss of control. But when you meet the sound within silence, you realize it's not empty at all. It's full of presence, full of life. The hum reminds you that awareness is always active, even in stillness, that you are never really alone, that you don't disappear when the noise stops. This recognition becomes one of the deepest forms of inner safety. You stop fearing quiet. You stop needing distraction. You begin to trust the depth behind experience, and that trust becomes a foundation for both restful sleep and deep meditative states. If thoughts come while you're listening to the inner hum, let them. Don't fight them. Just let your attention remain with the sound, not with strain, just as a gentle resting place. The mind may wander, but it will return more easily each time because you've given it something soft, something real, something that doesn't demand or judge. This is not about escaping thought. It's about recognizing that beyond thought, there is still life. Stillness is not the absence of activity, it's the presence of depth. And that sound, that faint, unspoken resonance, is the bridge. Some traditions say that even in death, this sound is present, that it is the last signal of the conscious mind before full release. Whether that's true or not, one thing is clear. When you learn to meet this hum in stillness, you meet something timeless in yourself, something untouched by stress, unmoved by anxiety, free from identity. And it all starts with listening, not with effort, not with trying, but with softness. A kind of sacred curiosity that opens the door to deeper rest. So tonight, as you lie in bed, don't chase sleep. Don't chase peace. Just listen. Let your attention rest behind your ears. Let the body melt into the sheets. Let the mind become wide and still. And if the sound arises, stay with it. If it doesn't, stay open. It's not about results. It's about returning, again and again, to that silent center where nothing needs to be different. This is your home. This is your refuge. This is the sound of stillness, waiting patiently to be heard. At some point, even the subtle sound within the silence fades into the background. What's left is a stillness so deep it begins to show you what's truly been beneath the noise all along. And sometimes that quiet reveals something uncomfortable, something your mind has been hiding under layers of distraction and thought. Because when the external noise fades, the deeper unrest often surfaces. And that unrest, if followed gently, can lead you to the root of your suffering. This is not a new problem. For thousands of years, Buddhist teachings have shown that suffering isn't just the result of external events. It's a chain reaction, a series of inner causes and effects that unfold in the mind every moment. If we follow that chain backward, if we trace it carefully, without fear, we begin to understand not only why we suffer, but how to stop feeding it. That's where the contemplation of paticca samuppada, or dependent origination, becomes one of the most powerful tools for inner freedom. especially before sleep, when the mind is tender, exposed, and still clinging to the events of the day. This is the moment when reflection can go deeper than words, when you are no longer thinking with logic, but feeling with awareness. The traditional sequence of dependent origination explains how suffering arises step by step. It begins with ignorance and unfolds into volitional formations, consciousness, name and form, and so on, eventually leading to craving, clinging, becoming, birth, and finally, aging, death, and suffering. But tonight, the path doesn't move forward. Tonight, we go backward. Starting from the restlessness you feel, whether it's anxiety, dissatisfaction, regret, or the subtle tension that blocks your sleep, you begin tracing it to its source, not to solve it, not to fix it, but to see it clearly, because when seen fully, suffering begins to unravel. You begin with the discomfort, not the symptoms like tiredness or tension, but the mental unease. Maybe there's fear about tomorrow, maybe regret about something said, or maybe it's just the low hum of dissatisfaction, that sense that something is missing or out of place. That's the doorway. You don't need to label it, just feel it without turning away. Then look closer. Beneath that discomfort is always some form of craving, a desire for something to be different. Maybe you want peace. Maybe you want validation. Maybe you want rest, or control, or love. Even the wish to fall asleep now, though it seems innocent, is a form of craving. You're grasping, wanting to escape this moment. And the wanting itself is creating more unrest. Craving is not evil, it's natural, but it binds the mind in a loop. It makes rest feel impossible because the mind is chasing something that doesn't exist yet. When you notice the craving, not to judge it, but to understand it, you begin to loosen its grip. Craving leads to clinging, and that clinging is like a hand wrapped around a hot stone. You think it will comfort you, but it only burns. So you look again. What are you clinging to? An identity? An outcome? A belief that sleep should come now, or else the day ahead is ruined? Are you attached to an idea of control? The more subtle the clinging, the more invisible it becomes. But with patience, you'll see it. You'll feel where the mind tightens. And that tightening reveals the next link, becoming. Becoming is the mental process of constructing a self. In that moment before sleep, becoming shows up as inner narratives. I need this. I can't function tomorrow if I don't rest. I'm the kind of person who overthinks. These are more than thoughts. They are identities. They are self-creations. And once the mind believes in them, it acts them out. But the self you create in your mind is never stable. It's built on shifting thoughts and moods. So becoming leads to birth. Not physical birth, but the birth of new reactions, new habits, new emotional patterns. And with every new mental birth, the cycle of suffering restarts. Aging, decay, disappointment, and the death of each moment's peace. And still, we go deeper. Behind becoming, you find the subtle push of volitional formations. These are mental habits, not just the thoughts themselves, but the force behind them, the energy that moves you to think, to want, to react, like the unseen current beneath a wave. These are not easy to catch. They often operate before thought appears. But when you sit quietly and observe the mind's momentum, you begin to feel them. The urge to distract, the push to plan, the tension before a thought takes form. That momentum is built over years. It's shaped by memory, by repetition, by unconscious beliefs. It moves fast, but you don't need to stop it. You just need to see it. Once it's seen, it begins to lose power, because all these formations arise from a deeper condition: ignorance. Ignorance in Buddhism doesn't mean stupidity. It means not seeing clearly, not seeing things as they are. When the mind believes that thoughts are truth, that emotions are permanent, that the self is solid and separate, it creates suffering. Not because of what's happening, but because of how it's perceived. Before sleep, this ignorance takes many forms. Believing that you are your thoughts, believing that sleep is something to be controlled, believing that discomfort is a problem. But when you begin to see through this fog, the mind quiets. Because ignorance can't survive clear awareness. This is the power of backward contemplation. You don't stop at the surface. You don't treat the symptoms. You trace the pattern back to its origin, not to blame yourself, not to analyze, but to release. Each layer you uncover becomes lighter. Each insight becomes a letting go, and eventually there's nothing left to hold on to, just presence. And here's what's extraordinary. You can do all of this without needing to think. This contemplation is not intellectual, it's experiential. You feel it. You sense the link between discomfort and craving. You notice how clinging pulls you out of stillness. You observe the energy of becoming, and you soften. You don't need to know every detail of the 12 links. You don't need to memorize Pali terms or study theory. The point is not knowledge, it's freedom. And freedom begins when you stop fighting your experience and start tracing it with awareness. This kind of contemplation doesn't make your mind heavy. It doesn't fill you with effort. It opens you. It teaches you to sit quietly with what is, and let understanding arise from stillness. Because the truth is, the mind already knows how to wake up. What it needs is space. Before sleep, this space can become sacred, a time not for analysis, but for clarity. You lie there not as someone trying to achieve silence, but as someone willing to see, to meet your experience without running. And in that meeting, the links of suffering begin to weaken, because every moment of awareness cuts the chain. It starts with restlessness. It leads to peace. But only if you walk backward, gently, patiently, through the inner landscape that created your tension in the first place. No force is needed, no pushing, just presence. Just the willingness to feel and follow. And with each step back, you're not going deeper into suffering, you're walking out of it, one link at a time, until what's left is so quiet, so open, so light, that sleep enters naturally, like a leaf falling into a still pond. No splash, no struggle, just a return. Even after tracing the roots of suffering backward, even after loosening the grip of ignorance and watching the mind untangle itself, a subtle unease can still remain. It's not loud, it's not chaotic, but it hums just beneath the surface. A quiet pull, a longing, a kind of hunger that doesn't go away just because you understand it. This is the restlessness of desire, the lingering craving for comfort, for stimulation, for sensation that hides behind the wish to feel good, to feel safe, to feel wanted. This is where many people stop, because this layer is delicate. It feels personal. It disguises itself as self-care, as relaxation, as harmless longing. But under that disguise is attachment. Attachment to the body, to sensual pleasure, to mental images that promise satisfaction but never truly deliver it. When you lie in bed and the mind drifts toward fantasy or craving or subtle desire for pleasure or escape, that's this layer. And unless it's seen clearly, it keeps the heart tied down and the mind too stirred to rest. There is a practice, unusual even in most Buddhist circles, that meets this craving directly. It doesn't fight it, it doesn't shame it, but it reveals the truth beneath it. This practice is called Asubha Bhavana, the meditation on impurity. Not impurity in a moral sense, but impurity as a way of seeing through illusion. It's the clear seeing of the body, not as something to grasp or decorate or cling to, but as a process, changing, fragile, and not worthy of fixation. This practice is powerful because it breaks the spell. The spell that says the body will give you lasting happiness. The spell that makes you chase comfort, beauty, sensuality, over and over, even when it leaves you restless and unsatisfied. Asubha doesn't reject the body. It doesn't tell you to hate it. It simply reveals what the body truly is: impermanent, unstable, and not you. Before sleep, when the body is quiet but the mind is still reaching for something, this meditation helps you release attachment. It strips away the false promises that desire keeps whispering. You begin to see that the craving for pleasure, even subtle, even innocent, is a form of agitation. It's movement, it's reaching, and anything that reaches cannot rest. To begin, this practice invites you to reflect deeply on the reality of the body, not its appearance, not its function, but its composition: skin, flesh, blood, bones, organs. The body, seen clearly, is not a temple of beauty. It's a living machine, always changing, decaying, shifting in ways we cannot control. Its fluids, its odors, its constant need for maintenance, none of these things are bad, but none of them support the fantasy of perfection that desire builds. This contemplation is not meant to disgust you, it is meant to free you. Because when you see the body for what it is, not better, not worse, just true, the obsession drops. You no longer need to feed the fantasy. You no longer need to chase the dream, and in that release, rest becomes possible. For those caught in cycles of mental imagery before bed, replaying interactions, imagining better outcomes, fantasizing about closeness or control, Asubha Bhavana becomes a mirror. It shows you that these images are fueled by grasping, that they keep the mind awake, not because they are pleasurable, but because they are never enough. They always ask for more. More thinking, more imagining, more grasping. And the more you feed them, the more the mind stirs. By contemplating the true nature of the body, these fantasies lose their shine. The mind starts to see the illusion, not intellectually, but viscerally. The beauty you clung to becomes neutral. The pleasure you longed for becomes unnecessary, not because you force it away, but because the fuel of delusion dries up. What's left is something much quieter, not a forced silence, a natural one, the silence that comes when craving ends. This practice can also be used to transform desire into wisdom. Because when you investigate desire instead of following it, you see its mechanics. You see how the image arises, how it builds itself, how it seduces you, how it promises relief and delivers agitation. And in that insight, a different kind of clarity appears. You stop running, you stop needing, you just see. One traditional method of Asubha Bhavana involves mentally visualizing the stages of bodily decay, from health to aging, from death to decomposition. This might sound grim, but it is deeply liberating. It teaches the mind to release its clinging, not through fear, but through understanding. It shows that the body cannot be held onto, that it is not a reliable refuge, and when the mind stops trying to possess it, the heart softens. In daily life, this practice might seem unnecessary or extreme. But at night, when desire is subtle and disguised, it becomes essential. Because the craving that keeps you awake is often not about sleep. It's about wanting to be held, wanting to be seen, wanting something more. And all of it, beneath the surface, is tied to the illusion of form. When you see through form, when you stop believing that the body is pleasure, you are no longer held hostage by desire. You become free to rest, not because you got what you wanted, but because you no longer need anything to be different. This freedom is gentle. It doesn't remove joy, it deepens it. It opens space for a joy not dependent on the senses. A peace that's not built on stimulation. It's not dry, it's not cold. It's quiet, yes, but full of dignity. A quiet that feels clean, whole, safe. This kind of peace leads naturally into sleep, because there's nothing left to chase. The mind isn't reaching, the heart isn't pulling. The breath flows without tension. The body rests in its truth. And the mind no longer needs to pretend. You can also use this practice to release attachment to the identity built around the body. So much restlessness comes not just from desire for others, but from desire about ourselves, wanting to look a certain way, wanting to feel strong, youthful, attractive. Even wanting to be healthy, while natural, can become a form of clinging. Asubha Bhavana shows the body as it is, neutral, impermanent, not self. And this view dissolves the pressure to be something, to become something, to maintain an image. This pressure, subtle, constant, is exhausting. It whispers every night, "Did I do enough? Do I look okay? Am I worthy?" But when you see the body clearly, you stop playing that game. You stop performing. You don't need to earn rest. You simply rest. Because you are no longer driven by a self-image. You are simply here. Asubha Bhavana also reveals a powerful truth about value. We often think beauty equals worth, that pleasure equals happiness, but that's not true. Beauty fades, pleasure passes. They can't hold peace. And when the heart finally sees this, it stops looking for refuge in fragile places. It turns inward, not toward isolation, but toward truth, toward stability. This inner shift changes how you meet the body, not just your own, but others. You stop judging. You stop comparing. You stop needing anything extra. You begin to relate to the body not as something to fix or flaunt, but as something to care for, to use wisely, and eventually to let go of with grace. This letting go becomes one of the most restful mental states. Because the mind that lets go of craving becomes spacious, light, open. And in that openness, sleep is not just easier, it is deeper, because it's not covering up desire, it's free of it. This practice might feel unfamiliar, it might challenge your habits, but its power lies in that discomfort. Because it is precisely the illusion of pleasure that keeps you circling. And the night, with its silence and vulnerability, is the perfect time to look deeper, not to reject, not to deny, but to see, to know, and to be free. You don't have to push away pleasure. You don't have to fight your desires. You simply see them clearly. And in that clarity, they soften. They no longer hold you. They no longer define you. And without them, rest arises, not as a reward, but as the natural state of a mind that has nothing left to crave. That is the quiet that Asubha Bhavana offers. A quiet that doesn't come from adding more comfort, more stimulation, more distraction, but from subtracting the illusion, from removing the veil, and finding beneath it all a peace that was always there, waiting to be uncovered. Once the illusions of desire fade, once the heart no longer clings to the body or the fantasy of pleasure, the mind starts to feel spacious. There's a lightness that wasn't there before. But even in that space, something else may begin to appear. Not craving this time, not attachment to form, but a set of deeper patterns, old mental habits that rise up when silence grows thick. Patterns that seem innocent at first, but always carry weight. These are not just thoughts. They're not random. They are forces, subtle, persistent, familiar. These are the 5 hindrances. They don't come all at once. Sometimes they rotate. Sometimes they take turns. And sometimes they blend into each other so smoothly that it's hard to tell which one is active. But at night, when you're lying in bed and the mind has nowhere left to run, they often appear. Not loudly, not aggressively, but through habits of thought and mood that keep your inner world disturbed. They disguise themselves as concern or comfort or harmless distraction, but what they really do is keep you from resting fully, deeply, completely. In the early teachings of the Buddha, these 5 hindrances are described as obstacles to concentration, clarity, and inner peace. They are sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry, and doubt. Each one clouds the mind in its own way. Each one disturbs the natural clarity that would otherwise support sleep. But what's often overlooked is how each of these hindrances shows up in unique forms during the pre-sleep hours. If you don't recognize them, they shape your night. If you do, you can soften their grip and allow the mind to settle on its own. Sensual desire is the first to appear, not always in the obvious ways. Sometimes it's not even about the body. It can take the form of mental replay, revisiting something pleasant, imagining how it could have gone differently, trying to hold on to a positive interaction. It could be as simple as craving comfort, more pillows, better silence, just the right temperature. It can also show up as mental fantasy, playing out small stories that bring momentary pleasure. But all of it has the same function. It pulls the mind outward. It creates subtle grasping. And even though it might feel nice, it keeps awareness stirred. The energy of desire is movement. It always wants something. It doesn't rest. It distracts not because it's loud, but because it's unfinished. And the mind cannot rest while seeking. When you notice this pull toward a memory, a hope, a craving, gently acknowledge it. You're not trying to erase it, just to see it for what it is. This seeing is not intellectual, it's intuitive. The moment you recognize desire, the grasp begins to loosen. Then, often without warning, comes ill will. You weren't thinking about that person. You weren't planning to revisit that memory, but something triggered it. Maybe a regret. Maybe a moment from earlier in the day that didn't go the way you hoped. Maybe just the feeling that someone didn't understand you. Suddenly, the mind turns sharp. It replays arguments. It judges. It criticizes. Or it turns inward and starts blaming you. Either way, the energy is the same: rejection. Something is being pushed away, and pushing always creates friction. Ill will doesn't need to be intense to disturb peace. It can be quiet, brooding, like a dull ache. It tightens the heart. It creates distance. It stiffens your mental posture, making it hard to relax. The practice here is not to convince yourself to forgive. That takes time. The practice is to notice the contraction, to feel where the heart hardens, and in that moment, to soften just enough to not follow the storyline. You can say silently, "Let this be," not as permission, but as release. You're not excusing the past, you're choosing freedom. Sloth and torpor are different. They don't stir the mind, they cover it. They don't feel like agitation, they feel like heaviness, dullness, mental fog. It can feel like the mind is shutting down, but not in a restful way. You might lie there, eyes closed, but there's no clarity, no real awareness. Just drifting, bouncing between thoughts and half-sleep. It can be tempting to think this is a kind of rest, but it's not. It's numbness. And numbness doesn't heal. It hides. This hindrance is tricky because it mimics sleep, but real sleep arises from relaxation and balance. Sloth and torpor arise from collapse. There's no brightness, no sharpness. The mind has given up instead of letting go. When you sense this dullness, the skill is not to fight it. That only adds tension. The skill is to bring gentle interest, a soft curiosity, sometimes just mentally naming it. Dullness is here, is enough to invite more wakeful awareness. You're not trying to wake up fully. You're simply choosing presence over drift. Restlessness and worry often come together. They speed up the mind. One moment you're thinking about the day, the next about tomorrow, then about something random from 5 years ago. And just as quickly, the body joins in, the shoulders tense, the breath gets shallow. The body wants to move, even if it stays still. The whole system is alert without a clear threat. It's as if the nervous system forgot how to slow down. This hindrance is probably the most common at night, because the culture we live in feeds it. Information overload, endless tasks, constant stimulation. By bedtime, the momentum is still running. You might be lying down, but mentally you're still sprinting. To meet this, the mind must learn to feel its own speed, not by force, but by noticing. You can say inwardly, "It's okay to stop now." That voice matters. That message matters. Because restlessness is often a defense. It's a way to avoid feeling something quieter underneath. When you allow the restlessness without feeding it, it starts to burn out. And then, in the silence that follows, doubt can arise. Not just spiritual doubt, but doubt in your own path. Doubt in your ability to rest. Doubt in the process. Thoughts like, will I ever sleep well again? Am I doing this right? Maybe I should just get up and do something. Doubt is subtle. It doesn't always sound like fear. Sometimes it sounds like logic, but its function is the same. It pulls you out of presence. It disconnects you from direct experience and traps you in evaluation. The danger of doubt is not that it questions, it's that it replaces seeing with thinking. Instead of being with your breath, you're analyzing your breath. Instead of feeling your body, you're wondering if the posture is correct. And the energy of wondering becomes the new distraction. Doubt cannot be resolved by answers. It is resolved by confidence in awareness itself, by gently returning to the now, even when the questions are loud. You don't need to solve them. You just need to be here. These 5 hindrances aren't flaws. They're not personal. They are ancient forces arising in all human minds. They are conditions, not choices. But when seen clearly, they lose their power. Each one disturbs sleep in its own way. Desire creates movement. Ill will creates tension. Sloth dulls awareness. Restlessness agitates. Doubt disconnects. But the root of all 5 is the same, a resistance to what is. When resistance drops, presence returns, and presence is the ground from which real rest can grow. The work isn't to force sleep. The work is to notice what's in the way, not to fight it, not to suppress it, but to recognize it, understand it, and choose to stay gentle in the face of it. You lie down not to escape the hindrances, but to meet them with care, with interest, with wisdom. And slowly, as each one is seen, felt, and allowed to pass, the mind grows quiet, not through control, but through understanding. That kind of silence doesn't come from pushing thoughts away. It comes from seeing through them. And when the hindrances are no longer running the night, sleep comes not as a reward, but as a natural result of a mind that is free. Even after you've seen the hindrances clearly, named them, understood them, softened around them, some nights there's still a voice that lingers. It doesn't come from craving, it doesn't ride on restlessness, and it's not always easy to trace. It shows up when the room is quiet, when the body is still, when everything should be calm. It speaks with familiarity. It knows your story, your fears, your doubts. It doesn't shout, it whispers, and it says things like, "You're not doing enough," "You're still not okay," or "Who do you think you're fooling with all this silence?" It's not just distraction, it's sabotage, and it doesn't want peace, it wants control. This is not a new phenomenon. In the ancient texts, the Buddha himself encountered this force again and again. It wasn't external. It took the form of Mara, the inner adversary, the voice of illusion, the energy that feeds self-doubt, fear, pride, and despair. Mara didn't vanish after the Buddha awakened. He kept appearing, often during moments of deep solitude or clarity, and each time the Buddha met him with the same approach, not anger, not rejection, but acknowledgement. "I see you, Mara," he would say, and in that moment, the power of the illusion would dissolve. These stories are not just spiritual legends, they are psychological blueprints. Because Mara still visits us all, especially when we're trying to rest, reflect, or grow. And the way the Buddha responded gives us a profound template for how to meet our own inner saboteurs. Not by running, not by fighting, but by recognizing their nature and choosing presence over reaction. When the inner voice arises at night, it often doesn't seem like Mara. It sounds like your own thoughts. It borrows your tone, your memories, your vocabulary. It weaves a narrative that feels personal. You'll never change. What's the point of trying? You're just pretending. But these thoughts are not coming from clarity. They are coming from old patterns, conditioned beliefs, survival habits. They sound familiar because they've been with you for a long time, but they are not the truth of who you are. The process of shadow integration begins when you stop identifying with these voices and start seeing them for what they are: habitual energies that rise and fall, not enemies to destroy, but parts of you that were once trying to protect you and no longer know how to stop. Mara does not come to hurt you. Mara appears because something inside is afraid of letting go, of resting, of being seen. So the work is not to silence the voice. That only makes it louder. The work is to face it, gently, steadily. You acknowledge what it's saying, not to agree with it, but to bring it into awareness. Yes, I hear you. You think I'm failing. You think this stillness is dangerous. I see that. In this moment, you're not collapsing into belief. You're not arguing either. You're witnessing, and this witnessing starts to unravel the power of the voice. The inner saboteur thrives in hidden corners. When it is ignored, it grows. When it is fought, it gets louder. But when it is seen, clearly, without resistance, it starts to lose form. You can practice this directly at night, during the moments when self-judgment or despair starts to rise. Ask yourself, who is speaking? Where does this voice come from? What is it trying to protect? Often, the voice is linked to a part of you that learned long ago that rest was dangerous, that visibility meant risk, that joy led to disappointment. These parts carry pain, not malice, and they rise when you get close to real peace, because that peace threatens their role. They don't know who they are without struggle, so they whisper, they provoke, they stir the waters. But here is the key. You are not those voices. You are the awareness that hears them. You are the space that holds them. The more you return to this witnessing position, not detached but present, the less you are controlled by what arises. You're not trying to become emotionless. You're becoming intimate with your own experience, even the parts you used to fear. This intimacy is shadow integration. It means allowing the difficult aspects of your psyche to step into the light, not to overpower you, but to be seen clearly for what they are, echoes of old pain, not threats to your being. The more you allow them, the less they grip you. You realize the voice is just a voice, a visitor, and like Mara in the suttas, it can be greeted with calm and clarity. In practical terms, this work often begins with curiosity. When a sabotaging thought arises, don't suppress it. Don't immediately replace it with positivity. Instead, stay with it. Listen fully. Trace its texture. How does it feel in the body? Where is the tension? What memory or belief is it touching? The more you stay close, the more the thought starts to reveal its roots. And once you know where it's coming from, you're no longer inside it. You're outside, observing with compassion. This doesn't mean agreeing with the content of the thought. It means not turning away from it. The Buddha never debated Mara. He never tried to fix him. He simply said, "I see you." And with that, the illusion lost its foundation. You can do the same. Every time a harsh inner voice rises, instead of resisting, offer recognition. I see this fear. I feel this doubt. I know where you come from. In that space, something softens. The internal saboteur is not just personal. It carries the weight of culture, of family patterns, of ancestral trauma. Sometimes you're hearing not your own fear, but the inherited voice of generations who never had space to rest or feel safe. When you witness that voice now, with care, you're not just healing yourself, you're interrupting a cycle that has lasted lifetimes. At night, when everything is quiet, these voices often become louder, because there's finally enough silence for them to surface. Don't see this as failure. See it as invitation. Each rising thought is a chance to meet yourself more fully, to bring awareness where there was once avoidance, to offer care instead of shame. And sometimes the saboteur voice doesn't speak in words. It speaks in urges, the sudden impulse to get up, to distract, to reach for the phone, to escape the present. These are also expressions of shadow, the part of you that doesn't yet feel safe in stillness. These impulses are not problems, they are signals. Listen. Ask gently, what are you afraid I'll feel if I stay still? And then stay. Breathe. Soften. You're not fixing, you're staying. Over time, this practice builds resilience. The voices don't stop, but they don't scare you. They don't shake you. You start to know them, and in knowing them, they lose their edge. They become background noise, familiar guests who no longer run the house. This is how the Buddha practiced, not with war, but with unwavering presence. He didn't try to destroy Mara. He outlasted him, with truth, with stillness, with the clarity that comes from knowing what is real. You can do the same. Every time you lie down and the voices rise, return to presence. Not as escape, but as refuge. A place big enough to hold every fear, every doubt, every old echo. You are not here to win against your shadow. You are here to welcome it so that it can stop fighting. And one day, perhaps, the voice rises and you smile, not because it's pleasant, but because you recognize it. Ah, you think, it's you again. And just like the Buddha under the Bodhi tree, you say the words that change everything. I see you. And in that seeing, sleep becomes not just possible, but natural, because the struggle has ended, and what's left is just this moment, open and free. After meeting the inner saboteur with clarity, after learning to sit calmly with even the most painful parts of yourself, a different kind of awareness begins to develop. You start to notice that your mind moves through states that feel like entirely different worlds. 1 hour you feel hopeless, trapped in dark loops of despair. Later, a thought of pleasure pulls you into fantasy and you feel invincible, like nothing can touch you. Sometimes you're consumed with worry, acting from fear as if danger is close, even when everything is still. These shifts are not random. They are not just moods. They are mental realms, states of being that shape how you perceive everything. And you visit them every night. The Buddhist cosmology teaches of 31 realms of existence, ranging from the lowest hells to the highest formless states of sublime absorption. These are traditionally described as literal places where beings are reborn based on karma. But deeper reflection shows that they are not just future destinations. They are psychological landscapes. They are internal states that we inhabit moment to moment. And every night, when you lie in bed and the mind opens without external structure, you move through them without even realizing it. The lower realms are not punishment. They are mind states filled with suffering. When you find yourself stuck in fear, shame, hatred, or confusion, you're already there. The hell realms are present in the mind that burns with regret, that tortures itself with judgment, that cannot stop reliving pain. The heat is real, not from fire, but from mental friction. This is the realm of aversion taken to its extreme. There is no peace in this space. There is only tightness, resistance, and the illusion that escape is impossible. One of the most powerful ways to free yourself from this mental hell is through recognition. When you catch the tone of your thoughts, aggressive, punishing, relentless, you can pause. You can see it for what it is. Not reality, but a realm, a temporary place, not your identity, just where your mind landed. That recognition breaks the illusion of permanence. You are not stuck. You are passing through. The animal realm arises in different ways. It's not brutal or dramatic. It's heavy, dull, instinctual. The mind moves with no clarity, no sharpness. Reactions happen automatically. There's no reflection, just impulse. At night, this shows up as mental drift, a kind of mechanical thinking with no depth. You scroll through memories, repeat old dialogues, fantasize in circles. It feels comfortable, but it's unconscious. You're not really there. You're moving through mental habit without question. This realm is not evil. It's just undeveloped awareness. It doesn't ask questions. It doesn't wonder about meaning. It just repeats. To exit it, you bring attention into the present, not by force, but by asking simple, sincere questions. Where am I? What is happening right now? What is this thought made of? Those questions awaken the reflective part of the mind. They return you to consciousness. You're no longer operating from instinct alone. The hungry ghost realm often arises when desire turns into desperation. You reach for something, comfort, attention, stimulation, but it's never enough. There's a hollow feeling that no amount of thinking or imagining can fill. At night, this appears when you're mentally grasping. You go from one thought to the next, one fantasy to another, searching for something to satisfy you. You may even find it for a moment, but the hunger returns. This realm feels endless because it's built on dissatisfaction. Even joy feels thin. You chase peace, but it slips away the moment you touch it. To leave this realm, you must feel the emptiness fully. Not to sink into it, but to recognize it as a signal, a sign that craving cannot fulfill its own promise. The practice is to stop chasing, to turn toward what's already here. The breath, the body, the simplicity of the moment. You stop looking outward, and the hunger slowly loses its hold. The human realm is more balanced. It's still marked by craving and loss, but it offers the clearest opportunity for reflection. When your mind feels present, thoughtful, open to both joy and pain, you are in this realm. You're not stuck in reaction. You can reflect, you can understand. And this realm is where growth happens. It's the space in which you can make choices about where to place your attention. If you find yourself here, stay alert. Don't rush through it. This is the ground where transformation becomes possible. Then there are the God realms. These can feel blissful, but they are also deceptive. When everything feels easy, when your thoughts say you're above the struggle, when the mind whispers that you've figured it all out, that's the realm of prideful satisfaction. It feels peaceful, but it's unstable, because it's based on subtle superiority. You're not resting, you're floating. There's a thin wall between this and collapse. The danger here is complacency. You believe you don't need to watch your mind. You believe you've transcended difficulty. But the fall comes quickly when you stop being honest with yourself. This realm can be exited only through humility, by remembering that awareness must remain active, that peace is maintained through presence, not status. Another God realm is that of distraction, masked as creativity. The thoughts seem profound, the insights feel original. You may think you're having breakthroughs, but if you look closely, you'll see they're not grounded. They're built on a desire to feel special. This realm feeds the ego quietly. It's a realm of aesthetic beauty, but without depth. To exit it, you return to the body. You ground the insight. You ask, is this useful? Is this rooted in awareness, or is it entertainment? You become honest again, not cynical, just clear. There are also the higher formless realms, states of quiet absorption where the mind feels infinite. These can appear as vast mental silence, a sense of deep unity, or the dissolution of boundaries. These are powerful meditative states, but they are not liberation. They are states. They pass, and attachment to them becomes another trap. When these experiences arise at night, it can be tempting to chase them, to seek that silence again. But if you become attached, the peace you felt becomes another source of longing. These realms can be helpful, but only if held lightly. You touch them and release them. You use them as resting points, not destinations. Throughout the night, your mind can move through multiple realms. You might start in restlessness, drop into dullness, rise into fantasy, then crash into judgment. Each shift is a rebirth, not metaphorically, but experientially. And the more you notice, the more freedom you gain, because seeing a realm as a realm allows you to step out of it. You are no longer trapped in the storyline. You're seeing the architecture of the mind. This awareness allows you to respond wisely. If the hell realm appears, you offer compassion. If the ghost realm appears, you offer simplicity. If the animal realm appears, you wake up with curiosity. If the God realm appears, you ground yourself in humility. Each realm has a medicine, and that medicine is not found in reaction, but in presence. The goal is not to avoid all these states. They are natural. They are part of the human experience. The goal is to see them clearly, to know where you are, and to choose not to live blindly in any of them. You lie down not to escape the mind, but to explore it, to notice which world you've entered, and to leave when you're ready. This practice develops what the Buddha called sampajanya, clear comprehension. It's the wisdom that knows what's happening while it's happening. Not detached analysis, but living clarity. You see your own mind moving through samsara, not over lifetimes, but over hours, and you learn how to walk with awareness. Each night is an opportunity to train this. Each moment of restlessness, boredom, or sadness is a chance to ask, what realm am I in? Not to label yourself, but to name the experience. That name gives you distance. That distance gives you choice. And slowly, the mind becomes less reactive, less dramatic, more settled. You stop falling into states blindly. You start observing them with a steady heart. And even when you find yourself in a lower realm, you don't panic, you don't judge. You know it's temporary. You've seen the pattern. You've walked this ground before. Eventually, this recognition becomes automatic. You lie down, a thought appears, a mood rises, and a quiet part of you already knows. This is just a realm. It will pass. I do not have to follow it. And with that knowing, the realm starts to dissolve, and in its place, something simpler returns. Just the body, just the breath, just this moment. No realm, no story, no rebirth, only rest. Once you begin to see the mind traveling through realms, passing from fear to fantasy to numbness and back again, something inside begins to shift. You stop blaming yourself for each state that appears. You stop reacting with resistance or attachment. Instead, you begin to ask a deeper question. What keeps pulling me into these states? What is it that repeats without me choosing it? What's moving beneath the surface? At this level, awareness begins to uncover what the Buddha called sankharas, mental formations. These are not just thoughts. They are the invisible forces that shape your patterns of thinking, reacting, feeling, and expecting. They move quickly, often unnoticed. They are conditioned tendencies formed by habit, memory, culture, and past experience, and they are constantly arising and passing away, silently shaping how your mind functions. At night, when all distractions fade, these formations become easier to detect. The day's activities no longer cover them. The body is still. The mind is exposed. That's when sankharas rise up most clearly, not as a single event, but as streams of reaction. A sensation arises, a thought follows, a memory is triggered, and suddenly you're in a mental movie with a full storyline before you've had a chance to choose. To work with these formations is not to analyze their content, but to notice their arising, their movement, and most importantly, their fading. The practice here is not to chase their meaning, but to observe their nature. You are watching impermanence in real time. You are training the mind to see how its own habits create experience. When you lie down and a familiar worry starts to form, don't fight it. Don't feed it. Just pause. Stay with it, not as the story, but as energy. What does it feel like as a sensation? Is it tight? Fast? Heavy? What mental voice comes with it? What does it want you to do? The key is to stay with the raw material of experience, not the storyline. As you do this, you'll notice something profound. If you don't follow the thought, if you don't add to it, the formation begins to weaken. You've interrupted the chain. Sankharas feed on attention. When they are not reinforced, they decay. Not instantly, but steadily. Like a fire burning out when no more wood is added. This is not suppression. You're not trying to make them disappear. You're observing them naturally dissolve. And this teaches you something powerful. You don't have to fix your thoughts. You don't have to argue with them. You only need to stop feeding them. You need to watch them end. Some formations are strong. They've been repeated for years. You'll notice they come with urgency. You'll feel a pull to react. This is not a failure. It's a sign of deep conditioning. But even these strong sankharas follow the same law. If not fed, they fade. If not clung to, they weaken. The more often you meet them with awareness, the less control they have over you. This process brings deep peace because you start to realize that much of your inner turmoil is not caused by external reality, but by internal formations repeating themselves. You might have thought you were lying awake because of a difficult conversation or a missed opportunity. But when you observe the thought, you see it's the same pattern that appeared yesterday and last week. The same shape, just a different costume. Seeing this breaks identification. You stop saying, "I am anxious." You start to see anxiety is arising. You're no longer inside the pattern. You are the awareness around it. And awareness doesn't suffer. It sees. This insight is not abstract. It's practical. Every time you lie down and watch a thought arise, every time you feel a habitual emotion and don't follow it, you are training this seeing. You are watching the machinery of your mind disassemble, not all at once, but piece by piece. Some sankharas are linked to the body. You may feel them as restlessness in the legs, tightness in the chest, or tension in the jaw. These are not just physical, they are energetic imprints of habit. When you notice them, bring attention there, not to change them, but to feel their texture. You'll find that even bodily tension begins to release when it is seen without resistance. This practice deepens over time. You'll begin to notice formations earlier. Sometimes you'll sense them before they fully arise. A tightening, a leaning, a subtle preparing. You'll feel the formation about to move, and in that moment of awareness, it softens. This is how reactivity is dismantled, not by willpower, but by timing. You meet the habit before it takes over. This is why presence is so powerful. It gives you access to the very moment the mind starts creating its patterns. And it gives you a choice you didn't have before, to let the pattern pass instead of being pulled into it. As you keep practicing this, the mind starts to trust the process. It no longer panics when a difficult thought arises. It knows, this is just another formation. I've seen this before. I don't need to follow it. I can stay here, in this moment, and let it pass. This trust creates confidence, not in your ability to control the mind, but in your ability to meet it, to be present with whatever arises. You stop fearing your thoughts. You stop fearing your emotions. You know they come and go, just like everything else. This shifts your relationship with sleep itself. You stop thinking of sleep as a prize to win or a state to force. You see it as what naturally happens when formations lose momentum. When the mind stops spinning its patterns, rest appears on its own. That's why this practice is not about doing something new. It's about undoing what was never necessary. It's about watching the mind return to stillness, not because you forced it, but because you stopped feeding what was keeping it restless. This also changes how you meet yourself. You become kinder. You see that the thoughts that used to overwhelm you were just conditioned responses. You stop blaming yourself for being reactive. You understand this was learned, and anything learned can be unlearned. You start to recognize your own patterns with compassion, noticing how certain memories always trigger the same loop, how certain moods always bring the same thoughts. You don't judge this. You observe it, and in that observation, you find space. Space is the key. Sankharas are tight. They squeeze your awareness into a narrow shape. They make you feel like there's no room to breathe. But awareness is spacious. It doesn't resist. It holds everything without getting pulled in. and the more you rest in that space, the less energy the formations have. Eventually, you may begin to notice that even positive patterns can be limiting. Replaying victories, clinging to helpful labels, needing certain conditions to feel good. These too are sankharas, and even though they feel pleasant, they still bind the mind because they create dependence. And dependence is another form of tension. So you begin to let go of everything, not in a cold way, but in a way that trusts the simplicity of now. You learn to rest without decoration, without needing anything to be added or removed. This rest is not sleep yet, but it's the condition that allows sleep to come. When the mind no longer chases or resists its own patterns, it stops spinning. And when it stops spinning, it sinks, not into dullness, but into stillness. And sleep, real sleep, grows from stillness. Not from effort, not from fixing, but from the gentle unraveling of what no longer needs to be held. The habitual thoughts will still come. The emotional patterns may still rise, but now they have no grip. You've seen them begin and end too many times to believe in their permanence. And this seeing, that deep, honest seeing, is what finally sets you free. As you begin to see how mental patterns form, rise, and dissolve, a new kind of sensitivity develops. Your awareness sharpens. You notice the mind's momentum before it takes hold. You start sensing how easily the smallest impression, a word, a glance, a tone, a vibration, can set a whole wave of thought into motion. You begin to see clearly that the mind doesn't spin in isolation. It's constantly responding to what enters it. And most of that input comes through the 6 sense doors: the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind itself. They don't just receive information, they shape your inner world. In Buddhist teaching, this process is not passive, it's not neutral. The senses do not simply reflect what's out there, they condition what arises in the mind. A single image can stir desire. A sound can awaken memory. A subtle fragrance can bring back a forgotten pain. The taste of something sweet can lead to craving. A bodily sensation can trigger fear. Even a quiet thought can ripple into a storm of judgment or fantasy. Every input becomes a seed for either clarity or confusion. This is why the Buddha taught Indriya Samvara, sense restraint, not as a rejection of the senses, but as a skillful way of protecting the mind from being fragmented. It's a practice of guarding the doors so that what comes in doesn't disturb the inner balance. It's not about shutting down experience, it's about choosing what's allowed to enter and how it's received. And this becomes especially important at night, when the mind is tired, exposed, and more easily stirred. In the hour before bed, most people unknowingly pour stimulation into their senses. Bright screens, fast-moving content, music with strong emotional tone, social interactions that carry unresolved tension, food and drink with sharp flavors or heavy emotional associations. Every one of these touches a sense door. Every one of these opens the gate for more mental activity. And then, when it's time to sleep, they wonder why the mind won't settle. Sense restraint is not about living in a cave. It's about making wise choices. You begin by observing what you allow in. Ask yourself gently, what am I feeding my eyes right now? Are the images calm or chaotic? What am I letting my ears absorb? Are these sounds grounding or agitating? What kind of touch am I inviting through posture, movement, or even clothing? Is it calming or sharp? You don't need to change everything at once. Just start noticing. With each sense, ask, does this lead towards stillness or fragmentation? When you bring attention to the senses, you realize they're not just doors to the world. They're also mirrors of the mind. The way you look, listen, taste, touch, and think reflects your inner state. And when the senses are overstimulated, the mind scatters. It jumps from impression to impression, chasing, avoiding, clinging. There's no space, no simplicity, no silence. One of the most effective forms of sense restraint is environmental simplification. This means reducing unnecessary input, not as a rule, but as support. You dim the lights. You close apps that carry noise. You limit conversation that activates strong emotion. You avoid news that pulls the mind into worry or reactivity. You step away from fast-moving entertainment that triggers fantasy or comparison. Each small choice becomes a gesture of care toward your inner world. But restraint doesn't mean suppression. You're not forcing stillness. You're creating conditions for stillness to arise. You're treating your mind like something valuable, not to be thrown into every current of stimulation. You're preparing it for rest the same way you might prepare a sacred space, with simplicity, clarity, and calm. Restraint also applies to how you relate to what has already entered. Suppose a strong image is lingering from something you saw earlier, or a sound is replaying in your memory. You can't remove it, but you can change how you meet it. Instead of reacting or following, you simply notice. This impression is here. You don't build a story. You don't add judgment. You let it pass. That's restraint, not blocking, not indulging, just guarding awareness. The mind sense is perhaps the hardest door to guard. It doesn't rely on external input. It generates its own content, thoughts, memories, plans, fantasies. But even here, sense restraint applies. You can't stop the mind from producing thoughts, but you can stop feeding them. You can choose not to enter each doorway. When a thought arises, you meet it with clarity. You ask, is this useful now? Is this leading toward rest or toward more movement? And then you let go. Training this kind of attention takes consistency, not effortful strain, but regular noticing. You develop sensitivity the way one tunes an instrument, not by force, but by listening carefully. Over time, the mind becomes less reactive. The senses become less hungry. They stop chasing stimulation and start resting in awareness itself. The body plays an important role here. It's not just a sense object. It's a gateway to grounding. When overstimulation rises, the body can bring you back. You return to the feeling of the breath in the belly, the contact with the bed, the warmth of the air. These are not distractions. They're anchors. They help close the outer doors so the inner space can deepen. It's helpful to establish a nightly rhythm, a simple pattern of choices that protect your sense doors. Not as a ritual, but as a practice of respect. Maybe you dim the lights at the same time each night. Maybe you stop scrolling after a certain hour. Maybe you use gentle, neutral sounds instead of emotional music. Maybe you allow a few minutes of silence before lying down just to let the senses rest without input. Each small act builds a habit of guarding. There is also a subtle form of restraint in how you use language. The words you speak or read before bed can set a direction for the mind. If they are reactive, sharp, or heavy with emotion, they stir thought. If they are spacious, honest, and gentle, they support calm. Even the inner dialogue, what you say to yourself, can be shaped with care. You choose words that soothe rather than stir. You don't lie to yourself, but you speak inwardly with clarity, not complaint. That's also sense restraint. As this practice deepens, you begin to feel the difference between quiet and stillness. Quiet is external. Stillness is internal. A room can be silent, but the senses still race. True stillness happens when the sense doors are gently guarded and the mind stops reaching outward. This is not cold or mechanical. It is warm. It is tender. It feels like coming home. And in this state, when the senses are no longer grabbing, when the doors are gently closed, not shut, not locked, but softened, something changes. Awareness turns inward, not as escape, but as return. The mind is no longer fragmented, it's gathered, collected, whole. Sleep comes from this wholeness, not as a command, but as a natural release. When the senses are no longer being pulled, the body naturally lets go. The breath slows, the thoughts thin. The inner space becomes wide enough for rest to settle in. This is the gift of restraint. It's not restriction, it's freedom. Freedom from the unnecessary. Freedom from the endless stream of input that keeps the mind busy even when the world is still. It's a practice of honoring the boundary between wakefulness and rest, of knowing when enough has been seen, heard, tasted, touched, and thought for one day. And when that boundary is respected, the mind doesn't resist sleep. It welcomes it, because it no longer fears stillness. It remembers that stillness is safe, that nothing more needs to be taken in, that rest is not a task, it's the return to what you are when nothing is pulling you away. When the senses are finally quiet, when external input is no longer pulling at your awareness, the mind begins to notice what has always been there: movement within stillness. Beneath even the most subtle breath or thought, there's a field of activity so fine, so rapid, so delicate, that it usually goes unnoticed. But in deep calm, especially just before sleep, attention can tune into the smallest layers of experience. Not emotions, not thoughts, not sensations as we usually know them. Something more fundamental, a flickering, vibrating texture at the very edge of perception. This is where the ancient Burmese Vipassana traditions point the mind, to the observation of kalapas. Kalapas are said to be the most basic units of material existence, subatomic mind-matter particles. These are not scientific atoms, but experiential units described in the Abhidhamma commentaries. According to these traditions, the body and even mental energy are composed of these particles, which constantly arise and vanish at incredible speed. They are impermanent, insubstantial, and ultimately empty of ownership. And yet, they are what we habitually identify as our body, our sensations, our reality. The practice of observing kalapas is not theoretical. It's a direct, sensory experience that arises when mindfulness becomes extremely sharp and equanimity deep. You're not thinking about molecules. You're noticing subtle vibrations, pulsing sensations, flickers of intensity throughout the body. These are the signs of matter breaking down into momentary events. And in the Burmese Vipassana system, watching these events is one of the most advanced and transformative practices. Before sleep, when the mind begins to lose interest in thinking but hasn't yet fallen unconscious, you may notice something strange. The body begins to feel like it's dissolving. Not in a frightening way, but like its boundaries are becoming less solid. You might feel tingling, buzzing, or lightness in the hands, face, or chest. This is not a sign of something wrong. It is the body's natural way of revealing its impermanence. It is the beginning of seeing kalapas. To train this perception, the first step is to rest your awareness on simple sensations: touch, warmth, pressure. You stay with one area of the body with complete stillness. As concentration grows, the sensation no longer feels like a single solid block. It becomes granular. It pulses. It moves. You begin to sense small flickering points, appearing, disappearing, too fast to count. There is no need to label. Just stay present with this changing field. What this shows is not a metaphysical truth, but a practical one. The body is not what it seems. It is not a fixed form. It is process, movement, constant creation and dissolution. When you experience this directly, your relationship with the body begins to change. It no longer feels heavy. It no longer demands ownership. You don't need to fix it or perfect it. You just observe its unfolding. This insight brings extraordinary peace before sleep, because most of the tension in the body is due to resistance, trying to hold on to comfort, trying to avoid discomfort. But when you see that both are made of the same fleeting particles, the clinging stops. Pain flickers, pleasure flickers. All sensations are just momentary formations. You stop fighting what's arising because you see that it's already ending. Kalapa observation also shifts how you meet mental states. Thoughts, emotions, even intentions, they too are seen as bursts of energy, not lasting truths. A fearful thought arises. You don't follow it. You don't suppress it. You watch it flicker like a light turning on and off. Joy arises, then passes. Worry rises, then fades. Every mind state is built on formations that disintegrate as soon as they appear. This isn't detachment in a cold sense. It's freedom through clarity. When you no longer believe thoughts are solid, you stop reacting to them as if they control you. You become the space in which these flickers happen, and that space is undisturbed, regardless of what appears within it. In deep stages of this practice, the whole body may begin to feel like it's made of tiny points of vibration, rising, falling, vanishing in rapid succession. There is no central self directing it. Just activity, just process. Some traditions describe this stage as the arising of Bhanganyana, the knowledge of dissolution. This is not sleep yet, but it's very close, because when the sense of solid form disappears, the mind naturally relaxes. Nothing is being held anymore. The illusion of needing to control or manage the body fades away. Even if you never reach the most refined perception, the principle still applies. You can still observe change. You can still notice that every sensation you thought was permanent is actually shifting. You can still feel the body become lighter just by watching it with steady attention. And that is enough. You don't need to experience advanced stages. The basic insight is already transformative. This body, this mind, this moment, none of it stays. This awareness also helps dissolve fear. Fear before sleep often arises from not knowing what's coming, what dreams, what feelings, what interruptions. But when you see that everything is already changing, even as you lie still, you realize there's no fixed state to protect. There's nothing solid to defend. You're already flowing, and rest becomes easier when you stop trying to freeze what cannot stay. To support this perception, reduce external input even more in the final minutes before sleep. Let the room grow dark and silent. Let the breath slow without effort. Keep your posture soft but stable. And place your attention gently on one area, perhaps the hands or the area beneath the nose. Let the awareness sharpen but not tighten. Stay still, then watch. You may not feel anything unusual at first. That's fine. Stay longer. Let the mind grow subtle. Eventually, the field of sensation begins to move, not dramatically, but like small ripples. Your job is not to understand or control. Just stay, just feel, just watch the changing. If distractions arise, acknowledge them, return. This is how you train the perception, not with force, but with patience. You are teaching the mind to see what's already happening, and in doing so, you are loosening the deepest habits of grasping. The Burmese masters often say that once you see the impermanence of even the smallest formation, wisdom begins to grow. Not through theory, but through experience. You know for yourself that nothing lasts, and that knowing creates ease. Ease leads to release. Release leads to stillness. Stillness leads to rest. This is how Kalapa observation supports sleep, not by trying to induce it, but by removing what disturbs it. By showing that there is no need to hold or resist what is always dissolving anyway. You rest not because you forced peace, but because you stopped disturbing it. And in that silence, in that gentle field of flickering dissolution, the mind no longer seeks. It simply watches, until watching itself fades. And sleep enters like the soft pause between moments. After observing the subtle disintegration of form, after seeing the body and mind flicker and dissolve into transient pulses, something begins to loosen deep within the mind. The structures you once believed were solid, like the edges of your body, the flow of thought, the shape of sensations, start to show their true, unstable nature. But there is one more structure that holds its grip the longest, one more layer that shapes how you move through your internal world. It does not make noise, but it sets a pace for everything you think, feel, and fear. It is the perception of time. For most people, sleeplessness is not only a problem of restlessness, it is a problem of time. The ticking of a clock, the fear of too few hours left, the thought of what tomorrow demands. Time becomes a prison. You lie down hoping to relax, and then the mind says, "It's already late. If you don't sleep now, you'll suffer tomorrow." Each minute that passes feels heavier than the last. But the truth is, this weight is not real. The anxiety comes not from time itself, but from how the mind perceives it. In deep meditation, particularly in the absorption states known as jhana, time stops behaving like a straight line. The usual sequence, past, present, future, softens. Minutes can feel like seconds or hours. You sit for what feels like 5 minutes and open your eyes to discover an hour has passed. Or you sit for an hour and feel like nothing happened. This isn't disorientation, it's the mind stepping out of its usual framework. What's happening in these states is not mystical, it's perceptual. The mind is no longer measuring experience through comparison. It is fully absorbed in one object, one process, one moment. And in that fullness, the idea of before and after has no meaning. There is only now, and that now has no duration. It has depth, but not length. This shift is not limited to formal meditation. It can happen in the moments before sleep if you learn how to release the pressure created by the clock. Because what actually keeps you awake is not just mental noise. It's the belief that you are running out of time, that sleep must happen soon, that the window is closing, and that belief creates tension, which delays the very rest you're trying to reach. The practice begins with understanding that the mind's relationship to time is flexible. It is not a fixed container. It's a construct based on memory, expectation, and measurement. You can start by watching how the thought of time creates reaction. Notice how often you look at the clock, either mentally or literally. Each glance brings a spike of anxiety, of regret, of urgency. You tell yourself, it's too late now, or only 5 hours left. These thoughts seem useful, but they add pressure. They create a conflict between what is and what should be. To let go of this, bring awareness away from time and back to experience itself. Instead of counting hours, feel the weight of the body. Instead of checking the clock, rest attention on the breath. Let go of measuring. Just be with the texture of the moment. When the mind says, it's getting late, respond not with thought, but with attention. Feel what that thought does to the body. Notice the tightness it creates. Then soften. This softening is the beginning of timelessness. You're not trying to stop time. You're allowing the mind to stop dividing the moment. In jhana, this deepens until even the breath is no longer noticed as a sequence of in and out. There is just stillness, a luminous, undivided awareness. While such absorption states require strong training, the principle can be applied right now. Simplify attention so fully that time no longer matters. Every moment spent watching the breath without judging it is a step away from time-based anxiety. Every second you stop comparing the now to what should happen next, you are entering a different rhythm, a rhythm that doesn't belong to the clock. This is not denial. You're not pretending time doesn't exist. You're simply not measuring yourself by it. This shift changes how you wait for sleep. Most people lie in bed waiting as if something must happen. They keep checking internally. Am I asleep yet? That checking is another form of measurement. It splits the mind into observer and timeline. You stop being present and start performing. You try to sleep instead of resting. But rest begins when you let go of trying, when you stop marking progress and simply allow. You can train this by choosing a simple anchor. Not to control the mind, but to focus it gently. The feeling of the air on the nostrils, the warmth of the blanket, the weight of the legs. Stay with this one sensation, not to block thoughts, but to stabilize attention. When the mind returns to time, to counting, to worrying, don't push it away. Just return. You're not running late. You're not falling behind. You are just here. As this practice deepens, You may notice that thoughts about tomorrow lose their urgency. Plans, problems, even important tasks begin to feel less heavy. This is not carelessness, it's clarity. You see that the future is not now, that worry does not create solutions, and that rest is not a delay of life. It is life. The more time you spend in this kind of awareness, the more the nervous system resets. You begin to feel that there's nothing chasing you, that there's no race to win. This calms the hormones of stress. It allows the body to move from sympathetic to parasympathetic tone, from alertness to restoration, and sleep becomes not a goal, but a natural slide into stillness. In jhana, the mind is said to rest on its object so fully that even the sense of time passing disappears. But this can also happen in small moments, when you stop labeling the breath and simply feel it, when you stop naming the posture and just rest in it, when you stop checking if sleep is near and just allow the moment to be full. This practice of timelessness also heals the deeper fear beneath sleeplessness, the fear of losing control. When you're ruled by time, you feel fragile. Every second wasted feels like a threat. But when you rest in non-linear awareness, you begin to trust a different rhythm, one that moves in waves, not lines, one that does not measure success by hours slept, but by presence felt. Even in the middle of the night, this shift is possible. If you wake at 3 a.m. and the mind starts calculating how much rest is left, stop, return to now. Don't count, don't plan, don't measure. Just rest with the breath. Let the awareness spread. Let the moment widen. Sleep may return, or it may not. But peace is not delayed by outcome. It is available in every second that is not compared to another. The more you train in this way, the more confidence you gain. You stop needing ideal conditions. You stop believing the story that not enough sleep means failure. You see that a few minutes of deep presence can restore more than hours of anxious sleep. You see that the mind, when not pressured, finds its own balance. Eventually, the obsession with how much time is left fades. What matters is the quality of awareness right now. You learn to carry yourself gently through the night, with no rush, no grasping, no judgment. Just one breath, then another. Just this moment, again and again, and over time, even the structure of night and day softens. You begin to live more fluidly, not pushed by the clock, but guided by attention. This is not neglect, it is deep listening. You know when to move because the body tells you. You know when to rest because the mind no longer resists stillness. This is the gift of stepping outside linear time, not to escape life, but to enter it fully, without panic, without pressure, without the illusion that now is not enough. And when this becomes your baseline, sleep is no longer a task. It is the natural result of a mind that has stopped measuring itself into pieces. A mind that knows the deepest form of rest is not found in the number of hours passed, but in the depth of presence returned to again and again. When you stop clinging to the clock, when you release the grip of time and rest fully in presence, something unexpected begins to unfold. You may drift into sleep or remain quietly aware, but either way, the mind begins to shift its direction. Without the usual noise, without the pressure to perform or control, the subconscious finally starts to speak. Not in words, but in symbols, shapes, feelings, scenes that appear during sleep layered with meaning not yet understood. These are dreams. And in the Buddhist monastic tradition, they are not dismissed as random. They are treated as reflections of the deeper mind, doorways into hidden stories that continue shaping your waking life. Monastic cultures have always paid close attention to dreams, not because they predict the future, but because they reveal the present. They offer a language beyond logic, a symbolic code that tells you what your mind has not yet spoken. Many monks kept dream journals not to analyze them with theory, but to trace the inner currents of karma, craving, fear, and insight. Dreams were seen as reflections of one's mental cultivation, revealing progress or obstruction in a practitioner's path. Before sleep, especially when the mind has been calmed through mindfulness or deep concentration, the dreams that arise tend to be clearer, not necessarily pleasant, but more transparent. The patterns are easier to trace, and when awareness has softened its grip on control, the subconscious is more willing to show what it has been holding on to. This is why your dreams, especially the recurring ones or the ones that linger after waking, can hold keys to deep transformation. In Buddhist contexts, certain dream symbols are universally recognized. Seeing light, a tree, or a clear path often suggests growing clarity or deepening insight. Falling, drowning, or being chased points to unintegrated fear or resistance. Monks are trained not to take these images at surface value, but to use them as entry points for contemplation. They ask not what the dream means in a rigid sense, but what it reveals about the state of mind from which it arose. This reflection is not about fantasy. It is about karmic residue. A dream about fire may suggest anger. A dream of running may reflect aversion. A dream of climbing may show striving. These are not judgments, they are mirrors. And the skill is not in decoding, but in meeting what's shown with compassion and clarity. You can apply this same process in your own nightly practice. Before sleep, create space for the mind to open, not by forcing dreams, but by softening mental control. You might say silently, "Whatever needs to arise, let it be seen." This small invitation makes a difference. It signals to the deeper mind that you are willing to meet what has been hidden. When a vivid or emotional dream does arise, resist the urge to dismiss it. Instead, sit quietly upon waking and hold the images in awareness. What emotions were present? What patterns repeated? Who appeared? What action took place? Don't search for linear meaning. Stay with the tone. Often, the body remembers even when the narrative fades. Use that feeling as your starting point. Traditional monastic dream work involves 3 steps: remembering, reflecting, and responding. You begin by gently recalling the dream, not in every detail, but with sincerity. You then reflect, not to find meaning in words, but to sense what the mind is showing you. And finally, you respond, not by fixing anything, but by meeting the dream's energy with awareness. If a dream shows fear, you meet it with compassion. If it shows confusion, you meet it with clarity. If it shows attachment, you meet it with spaciousness. This is not dream control. It is dream integration. You are allowing the unconscious to become conscious, one image at a time. In Burmese and Thai forest traditions, senior monks have sometimes interpreted dream images for younger practitioners, not as fortune-telling, but as guidance on the inner path. A dream of broken structures might reflect mental deconstruction. A dream of fruit may point to the ripening of past practice. A dream of darkness followed by dawn may symbolize a breakthrough in awareness. Again, the meaning is never fixed. The importance lies in how the dream is received. One of the most powerful uses of this process is to rewrite subconscious scripts. So much of what keeps the mind restless at night comes not from what happened during the day, but from long-held inner stories that remain unexamined. Stories of failure, of being unsafe, of not being enough. These narratives do not always speak in language. They show up in symbolic form, repeated scenarios, helplessness, endless effort, fear of falling or being exposed. When such a dream appears, it is not a problem. It is a gift. The script is surfacing, not to haunt you, but to be rewritten. You begin the process by staying present with it, noticing its pattern. Then, through reflection or even conscious visualization, you offer the dream a new ending. You don't force the story to be different. You simply introduce a new possibility. Safety instead of fear, calm instead of panic, acceptance instead of shame. Over time, these new endings begin to shape the subconscious itself. You are not brainwashing yourself. You are releasing old karmic impressions by giving the mind a chance to rest in clarity, even within the realm of dreams. This affects not only sleep, but daily life. You start to notice your reactions are softer. Your thoughts are less automatic. You have interrupted the cycle of reactivity by changing the terrain it moves through. This practice also teaches humility. The subconscious does not operate on your schedule. It brings forth what you're ready to see, not what you want to see. A painful dream is not failure. It is exposure, and exposure leads to release. When you begin to view dreams as part of your practice, not outside it, you stop fearing what arises. You learn to welcome each symbol as a message from the inner landscape. There are also specific monastic methods for working with dreams. One involves mental noting during dreamlike states. If you find yourself aware while dreaming, practice simple mindfulness. Seeing, hearing, thinking. This brings awareness into the dream itself. Even if lucidity is not present, the habit of noting shapes the way the mind moves through subconscious material. Another method is to establish an intention before sleep, what's called adhitthana, or firm resolution. You might say silently, "May the mind show me what needs to be seen with clarity and kindness." This is not a command. It is a soft anchor. You may also keep a notebook beside the bed, not to analyze, but to support memory. Writing down a few key images immediately after waking helps keep the connection between surface and depth. It trains the mind to value what it sees beneath the surface. Over time, you'll begin to recognize recurring themes. These are your personal dream symbols, shaped by your life, your practice, your karma. When treated skillfully, dreams become a nightly meditation. Not one you control, but one you attend to. Each night becomes a dialogue between surface awareness and the deeper layers of the mind. And this dialogue continues shaping who you are becoming, not by force, but through attention. The Buddha's own life includes powerful symbolic dreams. Before his awakening, he saw himself sitting on a vast mountain, undisturbed. After his enlightenment, he had dreams that reminded him of his past lives, his path, and the illusions still present in the world. These dreams were not distractions. They were teachings. Your dreams, too, can teach, not as prophecy, but as reflections. You don't need a monk to interpret them. You need a still mind, a soft heart, and the willingness to listen. So as you lie down, as the body becomes quiet and the mind begins to release control, know that what arises in dream is part of the journey. You do not need to fear what the mind shows you. Each image is a chance to see more clearly. Each emotion is a chance to meet yourself more fully. And with each night, you become more fluent in the language of the inner world. Not by forcing meaning, but by staying present. Not by controlling content, but by welcoming contact. And in that contact, transformation begins, gently, quietly, from the inside out. The moment you begin to meet your dreams with mindful presence, something profound begins to shift. You are no longer just drifting through unconscious material. You are participating in the reshaping of your inner world. Patterns rise not as threats, but as invitations. Emotions no longer push you around. They offer depth. And as this sensitivity grows, you come closer to what the Buddha described in one of his earliest and most practical teachings, the recognition and abandonment of the mental taints that lie buried beneath the surface. These are not small distractions. They are the deeper stains of perception, the filters that keep you cycling through unease even when everything outside is quiet. And the time before sleep is one of the most powerful opportunities to see and release them. The Sabbasava Sutta, found in the Majjhima Nikaya, speaks directly to this. The title means all the taints, a reference to the underlying tendencies that defile the mind and sustain suffering. These taints are not just bad habits. They are patterns of mental intoxication, ways the mind distorts reality through craving, ignorance, wrong views, and the deep belief that peace must be earned rather than allowed. They don't shout, they linger. And when you lie in bed at night and the mind begins to churn, it's often these subtle undercurrents doing the work. Not your conscious choices, but inherited conditioned tendencies running on their own. The Buddha didn't offer one solution. He outlined a complete method of abandonment, a toolkit of ways to let go of these taints, depending on how they show up. And these methods are not just for monks in forests. They apply to every sincere practitioner who wishes to end the day clean, not just on the surface, but in the deepest levels of the mind. The first method is knowing. Some taints, he said, are to be abandoned through seeing clearly. These arise when there is confusion, a misunderstanding of what leads to peace. So the work begins by naming what has surfaced. If there's worry, acknowledge it as worry. If craving arises, see it as craving, not your craving, not a story to follow, just a mental event. The act of clearly seeing a defilement loosens its hold. It doesn't need to be argued with, it needs to be recognized. At night, this form of seeing becomes a gentle inspection. You ask, what is here now? Not what happened during the day, not what will come tomorrow, but what formation is present right now, just beneath the surface? Fear, restlessness, doubt. You shine light on it without judgment. You bring awareness to the exact place where confusion begins. This alone can dissolve the need to follow it any further. The second method is restraint. Some taints, the Buddha said, are to be abandoned by guarding the sense doors. This links directly to the earlier practice of Indriya Samvara, sense restraint. It's not about closing yourself off. It's about refusing to let the mind be pulled in by every sensory impression. Before bed, this means consciously choosing what you let enter through your eyes, ears, and thoughts. You protect the mind not with force, but with clarity. You say, "I will not feed this unrest tonight. I will not add fuel to this craving." This is restraint, not from life, but from harm. The third method is using. Some taints are to be abandoned through wise use. This means treating everything in your life, your tools, your body, your comforts, not as objects of indulgence or identity, but as supports for clarity. Before sleep, this can become a quiet reflection. How am I using my energy right now? How am I relating to this bed, this breath, this body? If attachment is present, loosen it. If misuse is present, realign. Everything becomes a question of purpose. Am I using this moment to awaken or to distract? The fourth method is endurance. There are taints that do not leave simply because you see them. They don't dissolve just because you restrain or realign. They stay, they burn, they test your patience. And these are to be abandoned through enduring them without reacting. This is the art of staying steady when the mind wants to run. It is the discipline of holding your seat while discomfort moves through. When irritation arises at night, toward the body, toward the past, toward the unknown, you meet it without flinching. You say, "I can feel this without acting on it. I can let this pass through." The fifth method is avoidance. This is not repression, it is wisdom. If you know that a certain condition, memory, or trigger leads to unwholesome states, you avoid it. Not because you're weak, because you're clear. You create boundaries. Before sleep, this might mean not engaging with certain kinds of content, not reopening conversations that ignite the same old flames. You don't need to prove anything. You're choosing to protect the inner field. The sixth method is removal. Some taints must be removed through active mental effort. These are patterns that don't dissolve with seeing or staying. They require mental work. You replace unwholesome thoughts with wholesome ones, not as denial, but as transformation. This may look like reflecting on impermanence when grasping arises, or bringing to mind a compassionate image when anger starts to stir. You are not escaping, you are shifting direction, deliberately turning the mind toward what calms rather than what fuels. And finally, the seventh method is development. The deepest taints are not simply removed. They are replaced by cultivating their opposites. You don't just abandon restlessness, you develop tranquility. You don't just see through craving, you cultivate contentment. This is a lifelong process, but it begins in the quiet moments before sleep, when you choose to rest the mind not in habit, but in practice. You might gently recall the qualities of the heart you are growing: patience, compassion, equanimity. You might breathe with the awareness that every breath is part of that cultivation. These 7 methods from the Sabbasava Sutta are not linear steps. They are flexible tools. Some nights you'll need to see. Other nights you'll need to endure. Sometimes avoidance is wisdom. Other times development is the only way forward. But the key is to make this work part of your evening path, not as heavy effort, but as cleansing. You are not fixing yourself before sleep. You are flushing out what no longer serves. When practiced steadily, these methods begin to change the way you relate to your mind. You stop fearing its contents. You stop getting caught in the old cycles. You trust that whatever arises, you have the means to meet it. You sleep not as someone who escaped the mind, but as someone who tended to it, who prepared the ground for rest with care. Over time, you'll notice less friction, fewer regrets at night, less spinning of the same thoughts, more space, more natural stillness. Because what disturbs sleep is not noise itself, it's the residue of the unexamined. When the taints are seen and worked with, that residue clears, and what remains is a mind that is ready to rest, not because it is exhausted, but because it is at ease. The Buddha's path was always practical. He didn't ask for blind belief. He offered methods that any sincere person could apply. The Sabbasava Sutta is a map for internal hygiene, and when used before sleep, it becomes a way to end each day not with avoidance or distraction, but with truth. You don't need to solve everything. You just need to see what is here. You don't need to become perfect. You just need to release what you don't need. You don't need to sleep without thought. You need to sleep without clinging, and that begins by abandoning what cannot follow you into peace. Once you've worked through the hidden mental taints, once you've watched them arise and dissolve with clarity, something quiet and strong begins to settle beneath the surface. The mind grows cleaner, but also more exposed. What remains, often, is a subtle vulnerability, a sense of needing to belong somewhere, of needing to feel held in something larger than the habits and histories you've just begun to release. There is a moment after the abandonment of what burdens the mind when you don't yet feel free but no longer wish to hold on. That moment calls not for more technique, but for grounding, not in theory, but in presence, not in effort, but in connection. This is where the earth becomes a companion, and the ancient gesture of Bhumisparsha, the earth-touching mudra, offers its silent support. In the traditional iconography of the Buddha's enlightenment, this is the gesture he makes when Mara challenges his right to awaken. Mara accuses him of having no claim to sit in that stillness, no validation, no proof, and in response, the Buddha does not argue. He does not speak. He simply extends his right hand toward the ground and touches the earth. In that moment, the earth is called as witness. The earth, with its quiet memory and unshakable stability, affirms the Buddha's right to sit, to awaken, to be free. This mudra is not symbolic alone. It is functional. It is a physical expression of inner certainty, not a certainty that arises from pride or defense, but from deep alignment with reality. When you touch the earth, even with just your awareness, you are saying, I do not need to justify my peace. I do not need to earn this stillness. I belong here, now, on this ground. Before lying down, especially on nights when restlessness remains after all inner work has been done, this gesture can act as a final bridge. It grounds the mind in the present, not just emotionally or mentally, but physically. You are here. You are alive. You are supported. You do not float alone in your efforts. You rest on something vast, older than memory, untouched by your thinking. The gesture itself can be simple. You may sit for a moment beside your bed and let your right hand extend toward the floor, fingers pointing downward, palm inward. You do not need to touch anything. It's not about contact, it's about alignment. You feel the weight of the gesture, its direction. You feel the settling that comes when you stop turning inward and allow the body to speak in stillness. This is not magic. It is remembering. A return to the ground where all thoughts dissolve, where all doubts lose strength. The earth becomes your witness, not in judgment, but in silent affirmation. It knows your fear. It has carried your sorrow. It receives everything without comment. And in that receiving, it teaches you how to let go. Even without the physical gesture, you can invoke the energy of Bhumisparsha. As you lie down, allow your awareness to rest in the weight of your body, not as a concept, but as sensation. Notice the pull of gravity, the contact with the bed, the downward motion that never resists you. This is the earth speaking, not in words, but in welcome. You may silently repeat, "This peace is mine," not because I earned it, but because I no longer resist it. This is not a declaration of entitlement. It is a humble recognition that stillness is not a privilege for the few. It is the nature of mind when not disturbed. You are not claiming anything new. You are stepping into what was always here. Some traditions view this mudra as the ultimate answer to doubt, not by eliminating doubt intellectually, but by anchoring beyond it. You cannot think your way out of restlessness, but you can ground beneath it. You can touch something deeper than fear, something that holds no opinion of your progress, something that simply is. On a subtle level, this practice helps to resolve the final energies that often prevent sleep: uncertainty, guilt, the sense of being disconnected from something meaningful. These are not loud like craving or anger, but they erode peace from underneath. They whisper that you haven't done enough, that you haven't earned this moment of silence. The earth says otherwise. In many Buddhist cultures, practitioners are taught to reflect before bed on the support of the four elements: earth, water, fire, and air. Of these, earth is the most solid, the most reliable. The bones, the skin, the ground beneath the body, all symbols of structure. When you touch the earth, even in your mind, you are reconnecting with form, stability, and the truth that your experience is not floating. It is held. This groundedness transforms how you fall asleep. Instead of slipping into unconsciousness, you begin to release into connection. The body feels safe. The mind doesn't need to hold itself up. You are no longer trying to escape the day. You are returning to a wider presence, one that includes everything you've felt, seen, and known, but asks nothing from you now. The practice can become a short ritual, not rigid, not formal, but intentional. As you prepare for bed, pause, breathe. Let the mind settle. Place your hand or your awareness toward the ground. Let it be a statement. This night, I rest with the earth as my witness. No past to fix, no future to control. Just the truth of now. If emotions rise, let them. You are not above sadness or joy. You are not trying to be untouched. You are remembering that you do not have to carry them alone. The earth can hold what you release. It has always done so. In difficult times, this gesture becomes even more important. When fear is sharp, when doubt is strong, when the mind cannot settle even after all practices have been applied, Bhumisparsha is the final posture. It doesn't solve the problem. It dissolves the isolation. You are not alone in your struggle. You are part of something wide, ancient, and patient. There is no special knowledge required to do this. No advanced training, just sincerity, just willingness, just the presence to place the body in harmony with the ground and let go of the need to hold your inner world together. You return to the simplest truth. I am here. I am held. I can stop. With this, sleep becomes something else. Not a process to endure, not a task to complete, a return. A quiet collapse into something that holds you whether you are aware of it or not. This is what the Buddha touched when he reached for the earth, not an external God, not a divine force, but the grounded truth that awakening, peace, and rest are already supported by the nature of life itself. He didn't defend himself. He didn't fight the voice of doubt. He turned downward and found what cannot be shaken. You can do the same. Each night, each time the mind resists rest. Each time the story says you are not ready, you can stop listening. You can touch the earth and let it remind you, stillness is not outside of you. It is beneath you. It is in you, and it has been waiting. After surrendering to the weight of the earth, after letting the body remember its place within something vast and unmoving, there comes a shift, not just downward, but inward. The surface finally settles, the senses rest, the need to perform dissolves. What remains is a rare kind of stillness. It is not quiet because nothing is happening. It is quiet because awareness no longer clings. From this point forward, what opens is not just deep rest, but the potential for a subtle yet powerful transformation of consciousness. This is the doorway to what early Buddhist texts refer to as Lokuttara Citta, the supramundane mind, the consciousness that is no longer caught in the cycles of the world. This mind is not mystical in the sense of being beyond reach. It is supramundane because it is not fabricated by desire, fear, memory, or preference. It is the aspect of awareness that is completely uninvolved in constructing personal stories. It doesn't think in language. It doesn't seek validation. It doesn't crave continuity. It just knows. And this knowing is direct, silent, complete. Before sleep, the possibility of touching this quality of awareness becomes especially accessible. When the body is still and thoughts begin to slow, the mind often approaches the edge of its usual constructions. Most nights it retreats, returning to familiar loops, sinking into dreams, or losing clarity altogether. But if you have prepared yourself by reducing mental noise, letting go of emotional tension, and grounding the body with care, you may notice that something subtler than thought begins to emerge. This is not another thought stream. It is awareness free from commentary. It feels like space, but alive, like presence, but impersonal. It sees without filtering. It rests without needing rest. It watches thoughts arise and fade without being pulled into them. It is untouched by desire for sleep or anxiety about waking. It is simply there, beneath every effort and every emotion, always. The Lokuttara Citta is not achieved by force. You cannot enter it through striving. You invoke it by not interfering, by letting go of the need to know anything in conceptual terms. This is different from dullness or passivity. It is a highly alert, highly present form of being that does not divide experience into past or future, self or other, good or bad. It is the mind as it is before identity gets involved. In Theravada teachings, this consciousness is connected to the moments of path and fruition, when the practitioner sees, even if just for a moment, the end of clinging. It's the knowing that arises when the mind fully lets go of its ordinary constructions. It is not something you own or control. It arises when the causes are right, and the hour before sleep, when all external roles drop away, can create the conditions for it to appear. To approach this space, you begin by softening any intention that remains, not in the sense of laziness, but in the release of mental effort. You stop aiming. You stop arranging. You allow everything to be exactly as it is, without needing it to be otherwise. If thoughts arise, let them move without chasing. If sensations come, let them pass without clinging. You're not pushing anything away. You're just not constructing anything extra. This practice may begin with a strong sense of presence, focused perhaps on the breath or the body. But as it deepens, even those anchors begin to dissolve. The breath fades. The body feels spacious. You are not drifting into sleep, but opening into a field where sleep may happen or may not. Either way, you are at peace. One way to stabilize this awareness is to gently reflect on the three characteristics: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self, not as intellectual concepts, but as direct perceptions. Everything arising now, this thought, this feeling, this image, is unstable. It does not belong to anyone. It offers no lasting satisfaction. Let that truth sink in, not as a conclusion, but as a lived recognition. Then rest. In that resting, something opens, not dramatically, not like a door swinging wide, more like a veil lifting. You sense that your usual reference points are gone. You are not the thinker. You are not the doer. You are not the one waiting to fall asleep. Awareness remains, but it is not about you. It is simply knowing. This knowing is the essence of Lokuttara. It is not altered by success or failure. It is not threatened by discomfort. It does not speak, but it understands. It does not remember, but it includes everything. It is not distant, but it cannot be held. If it arises, let it be. If it does not, don't chase. The very act of trying to grasp it turns awareness back into becoming. The mind re-enters its old patterns. You lose the simplicity. So instead of aiming for a state, aim for surrender. Surrender to the moment without reference. Let go into that which needs no fixing. This consciousness also transforms how you relate to thoughts. In normal mind states, thoughts seem loud, important, yours. But in the presence of Lokuttara awareness, they become like passing clouds. You don't engage with their content, you see their movement, you recognize them as not self, as formations, as nothing more than temporary flashes. There is no struggle, only seeing. This awareness also dissolves fear, not because fear disappears, but because it is seen without resistance. Even fear is just a wave in the field of knowing. You don't need to make it go away. You just don't follow it, and because you don't follow it, it loses power. When resting in this consciousness, even the desire for sleep may vanish. You're not concerned with sleeping anymore. You are abiding in a kind of inner clarity that transcends the usual needs of the body-mind. You may sleep deeply afterward or remain quietly awake. Either way, the heart remains still, the mind remains free. This is not detachment in the cold sense. It is intimacy with the present that is so complete, it no longer requires a separate self to observe it. You are not apart from experience. You are not merging with it either. You are the knowing that holds it all. Some traditions say that Lokutara Chitta can only arise in deep meditative absorption. Others suggest that brief glimpses are possible in ordinary life, especially when the mind is unusually calm and surrendered. Regardless of your view, the experience of this quality of mind, however subtle, leaves a lasting impression. You begin to see that thought is not necessary for being, that the mind can know without dividing, that rest is not about sleep, but about not resisting what is. In the final minutes before you drift away or drop into sleep, allow yourself to stay gently with this awareness, not holding, not controlling, just present. If sleep comes, let it be soft. If wakefulness remains, let it be bright. You are not measuring time, you are not watching progress, you are simply being. And in that being, the deepest form of rest appears. Not the kind that comes from the body lying down, the kind that comes from the mind letting go of everything, even of the need to let go. After resting in the space of non-conceptual awareness, after touching the dimension of mind that no longer needs to hold or interpret, a different quality starts to take shape, one that does not come from effort, but from maturity. Not a new method, not a deeper stillness, but a subtle refinement. It is no longer about stopping thoughts or even watching thoughts. It becomes about understanding experience in a way that prevents confusion before it begins. This is where sati sampajanya, mindfulness with clear comprehension, begins to unfold. And this is what helps the mind become not only still, but wise. Sati, or mindfulness, is often described simply as present moment awareness. Being here, noticing what is happening, feeling the breath, the body, the thoughts. But in this early, basic form, mindfulness can still exist alongside confusion. It may help you stay grounded, but it doesn't necessarily stop the cycle of reactivity. You can be present and still caught in your patterns. You can observe a thought and still follow it. You can know what is happening but not understand how or why it affects you. Sampajanya adds something essential. It brings clarity to the function and context of what is happening. It knows not only what you are doing, but why, how, and with what consequence. It's the part of the mind that sees whether the action is appropriate, whether the thought is worth continuing, whether the feeling is rooted in truth or habit. Without sampajanya, mindfulness is passive. With it, mindfulness becomes intelligent, discerning, and deeply transformative. This is what changes how the mind meets experience, especially in the quiet of night when everything inside begins to surface. You may be aware of restlessness, but without clear comprehension, you might respond to it automatically by shifting positions, analyzing your day, planning your future. With sampajanya, you pause just long enough to ask, is this helpful? Is this necessary? Is this what brings peace? That moment of questioning does not interrupt mindfulness, it deepens it. It allows the awareness to become more than passive noticing. It allows mindfulness to carry understanding, and that understanding is what dissolves the unconscious patterns that often drive the most persistent mental noise. When lying down, the body still and breath gentle, this clarity becomes possible in a new way. You begin to observe the exact moment a reaction forms. not when it explodes, but when it whispers. The thought about tomorrow, the subtle bracing in the chest, the way your attention slides into a story. With clear comprehension, you see it not just as content, but as process. This is how the mind tries to control. This is how tension begins. This is the doorway to distraction. And in that precise moment of seeing, the mind softens. It doesn't react because it already understands. This is the essence of what makes mindfulness powerful, not its ability to track every breath, but its capacity to recognize what matters and what doesn't. In practice, this looks like a constant, gentle inquiry, not verbal analysis, but a felt sense of relevance. You breathe and you know, this is for calming. A thought appears and you know, this is not worth feeding. A sensation arises and you sense, this will pass on its own. You begin to trust this inner intelligence more than the stories the mind usually tells. This is especially helpful for unconscious reactivity, the habits that operate below the level of conscious thought, the quick judgment about how the day went, the urge to check your phone again, the tension that builds without reason. These patterns can't be stopped by raw effort. They need to be seen in context. They need to be understood as unnecessary. And only clear comprehension can provide that perspective. When this understanding matures, mindfulness becomes continuous, not rigid or forced, but self-sustaining. It no longer needs to be maintained with effort because it starts working from insight. The mind begins to recognize the futility of its old movements. It stops chasing, not because it was told to, but because it sees no value in continuing. Sampajanya also prevents mindfulness from becoming another form of control. When you try to use mindfulness to suppress experience, to push away discomfort, to manage every detail of attention, you are still caught in subtle resistance. With clear comprehension, you no longer misuse mindfulness. You apply it where it is needed and let go where it is not. This also transforms the way you experience the body. Instead of scanning or labeling each part, you begin to understand the quality of posture, breath, and tension. You sense what the body needs to relax. You recognize where effort is still hiding. You stop adjusting based on comfort alone and start responding based on insight. With thoughts, the same principle applies. Instead of watching them like objects, you see their role in your state of mind. You understand their weight, their speed, their direction. Some thoughts are neutral. Others are laced with expectation, identity, or fear. Clear comprehension allows you to let go not by rejecting thought, but by recognizing when it leads nowhere. That clarity creates peace, not by stopping thought, but by no longer investing in it. This evolved form of mindfulness is also deeply ethical. It's not about morality in the traditional sense. It's about alignment. Sampajanya helps you see when your actions, even internal ones, create dissonance. It reveals when a choice adds tension or when it opens space. It teaches you to move from harmony rather than habit. As the night deepens, this understanding becomes even more important. The mind is less distracted. The patterns are more visible. With clear comprehension, you begin to navigate the space between waking and sleep with more awareness. You see the moments when you're slipping into fantasy. You notice the turn toward worry, and you return, not with force, but with precision. You learn to pause not to stop movement, but to see its nature. You stay still not because movement is bad, but because stillness reveals what's behind it. You let the mind rest not by telling it to be quiet, but by showing it the peace that comes from not continuing. This quiet is not just silence, it is understanding. It is the mind becoming familiar with itself in a way that no longer requires constant commentary. The inner narrator grows quiet because there is nothing left to explain. Experience is self-evident. No story is needed. In this way, sati and sampajanya become partners. Mindfulness holds. Comprehension sees. Together, they allow the mind to remain steady in all conditions, not as an act of discipline, but as a natural result of wisdom. And when wisdom becomes natural, rest becomes natural. Because the mind no longer resists the moment it is in, it no longer needs to escape. It no longer needs to defend. It only needs to understand. And from that understanding, sleep enters not as an escape from life, but as a gentle continuation of stillness. When mindfulness matures into clear comprehension, and the mind begins to see its own activity with wisdom rather than control, the external world starts to reflect that clarity. You begin to notice the relationship between inner attention and outer action. Even the smallest motion becomes meaningful. There is a natural shift from chasing peace through stillness to expressing peace through movement. This is where ritual enters the path, not as superstition, not as habit, but as a conscious way of shaping the mind through deliberate, embodied presence. And in the Theravada tradition, one of the most overlooked yet powerful examples of this principle is the ancient monastic practice of folding robes before rest. This act, simple and repetitive, was never about tidiness alone. It was about preparing the body and the mind for letting go. It marked the closure of the day, a final gesture of mindfulness made visible. Every crease, every adjustment, every smooth line was done with care. Not to perform, but to practice. In a monastery, robes are not just clothing. They are a symbol of renunciation, discipline, simplicity, and intention. To fold them without attention would mean disconnecting from what they represent. To fold them with full awareness meant carrying the Dhamma into motion, and that changed everything. In modern life, this ritual may seem distant, but its principle remains fully alive. The way you move before rest shapes the mind you bring into sleep. The robe folding practice is a form of gentle purification, not of morality or behavior, but of attention. It slows the rhythm of the day. It trains the eyes, the hands, the breath to work together. It replaces mental noise with physical reverence. There is no goal but care, and care itself becomes a doorway into peace. The ritual begins with presence. A monk returns to his kuti or dwelling at the end of the day. The robe is taken with 2 hands, unfolded gently, and shaken out in slow motion. There is no rush. The cloth is laid flat, inspected, and prepared. The folding begins, not like packing for a trip, but like composing a chant. The corners align, the hands move symmetrically. Each movement has its place, and the mind follows each step, not as a watcher, but as a participant. This sequence is not robotic. It is not mindless repetition. The intention is to unite body, mind, and environment into one simple act. This unity acts as a container. It holds the agitation of the day. It gives structure to the transition from effort to rest. Folding robes becomes a soft threshold, one step closer to stillness. You don't need to be in robes to practice this. The spirit of the act can live in your own routine. Whether it's folding a blanket, arranging your clothes, preparing the space around your bed, when done with full awareness, these actions become internal gestures. They say, I am letting go now. I am caring for what I have. I am not rushing away from this moment. This quiet order has a calming effect on the nervous system. The body recognizes the pattern. It begins to associate this ritual with safety, with simplicity, with closure. This reduces the need to think, plan, or solve. It eases the mind into rest without forcing silence. You are not trying to stop anything. You are shaping attention through motion. This form of reverence is not aesthetic. It is not about perfection. It is about depth. A monk folding his robe does not judge himself for uneven lines. He uses the moment to return to breath, to slow his thoughts, to show up fully. That intention purifies the act. The robe becomes a mirror. The more you rush, the more the folds resist. The more you settle, the easier it all moves. In a similar way, your own nightly gestures can become mirrors. If you prepare your sleeping space with irritation, the mind carries that residue into bed. If you do it with care, with quiet attention, it transforms into a meditative act. You are not preparing for escape. You are preparing for surrender. This is what makes monastic rituals so enduring. They take something ordinary and elevate it through presence, not by adding complexity, but by removing distraction. A ritual is not about the act itself, it's about how the act is done, and that how is what trains the heart. The robe folding ritual also teaches you about completeness. Not everything in life is solved by stillness alone. Sometimes motion completes the circle. There is something deeply satisfying about finishing the day not with consumption, but with care. The world outside may remain chaotic, but your gesture becomes an act of order, an act of closure. It says, "The day is done. I do not need to carry anything more." For many monastics, this ritual was also a way to release identity. The robe is worn throughout the day in public. It carries function, symbol, and responsibility. To remove it and fold it is to put aside the outer role. To return to the simplicity of being, it is a gesture of humility, of stripping back. And when practiced with sincerity, it allows the practitioner to lie down not as a role, but as a being. The same is true for you. As your day ends, as you fold your clothes, close your devices, or dim the lights, do it not just as routine. Do it as ritual. Use the gesture to remove identity, to return to the simplicity that exists when there's nothing left to prove. You are not your tasks. You are not your image. You are this body preparing to rest. That recognition itself is peace. This embodied awareness carries through into sleep. The more you train the body to move with mindfulness, the easier it becomes for the mind to let go. You are building a bridge from action to stillness, and that bridge is not crossed by effort, but by rhythm. Folding, placing, arranging, not to get it right, but to practice returning. This practice also cultivates patience. The robe doesn't fold itself. It requires time, space, repetition. And the same is true for your attention. You may feel rushed, but the ritual asks you to wait, to move slowly, to notice. And in that slowness, the deeper mind begins to appear. There's also a gentleness that arises when motion is infused with care. You stop grabbing, you start placing, you stop multitasking, you begin attending. That shift changes how you touch your surroundings. It changes how you touch your own mind. You no longer impose silence. You invite it. As this ritual deepens, it becomes less about sleep and more about integrity. You are ending your day in alignment. No loose ends, no hurried steps, just presence. This sense of inner order travels with you into rest. It makes sleep not an interruption, but a continuation. You are no longer collapsing into bed. You are arriving. You are not shutting down. You are letting go. You are not chasing peace. You are making space for it. This is what monks do when they fold their robes. They return. They simplify. They remember that discipline is not about control, it's about care. And care, when practiced in motion, becomes wisdom in stillness. So tonight, before sleep, try this. Choose one small gesture, one thing you do each night, and do it as a monk would, with your full attention, with your breath, without rush. Let your body teach your mind. Let motion become a message. Tell yourself without words, I am ready to stop. And let that message carry you, not toward sleep alone, but toward the kind of rest that begins before your eyes ever close. When the body begins to move in harmony with intention, when the gestures that end the day carry the softness of care instead of the weight of obligation, the mind naturally follows. Stillness no longer feels separate from motion. What begins in ritual continues in silence. And the distance between awareness and action narrows. It is in these subtle moments, when everything feels settled, simple, and effortless, that a deeper current can be felt beneath the surface of ordinary attention. A direction that moves inward, not with force, but with inevitability. This current is not created, it is discovered. In the Pali texts, it is called anuloma kika, the function of conformity, or the alignment of the mind with the momentum of liberation. This concept belongs to a series of insights described in the stages leading to stream entry, the first irreversible shift on the path of awakening. But its essence is not reserved only for advanced practitioners. It speaks to something every meditator has access to, those brief but powerful moments when the mind drops resistance and leans into release. These are not grand breakthroughs, they are micro moments, glimpses, shifts that often pass without notice, yet leave a subtle clarity behind. The function of anuloma is not to push the mind forward, it is to match the direction of freedom. Every time you pause before reacting, every time you notice a thought and choose not to follow it, every time the breath deepens on its own without being manipulated, the mind touches this alignment. It is not dramatic. It is often quiet. But in that quiet is a signal. The wheel is turning the right way. You are no longer trying to reach peace. You are beginning to remember what it feels like when nothing blocks it. These moments are the most valuable part of a contemplative life, not because they last long, but because they are real. They show you what the mind is like when it stops chasing, and even if the insight does not stabilize, the impression remains. The body remembers, the heart softens, the mind becomes slightly more willing to trust stillness. To embody Anuloma Kika means learning to recognize these moments and allowing them to deepen, not by clinging to them, but by letting them teach you. When a thought begins to dissolve on its own and you don't interrupt it, you are embodying this function. When a judgment arises but is met with space instead of commentary, you are moving with the momentum. When a breath lengthens without effort and you allow it to unfold, you are not initiating liberation, but aligning with it. This shift is often missed because it lacks the noise we associate with transformation. There are no fireworks, no declarations, only less tension, more simplicity, a quiet willingness to remain with what is instead of adjusting it. But this is the nature of true release. It removes rather than adds. It simplifies rather than solves. It leads not through strategy, but through recognition. The function of anuloma begins when the mind no longer resists the characteristics of reality. Impermanence is not fought. Unsatisfactoriness is not denied. Non-self is not debated. These truths, when allowed, begin to dissolve the layers that were built to avoid them. You begin to see that what you were holding on to was not reality, but commentary. And when that commentary fades, a different kind of momentum takes over. It doesn't mean the path becomes passive, it becomes cooperative. You are no longer fighting the current. You are letting it carry you, and that shift changes everything. Practice stops being a task. Sleep stops being a struggle. Stillness stops being an achievement. Everything becomes a return. This kind of micro-momentum appears in all sorts of situations, when the body relaxes in meditation after initial discomfort, when the mind starts to release a looping thought without intervention, when the breath flows without control and the urge to fix it disappears. These are not the final moments of awakening, but they echo it. They are aligned with its logic. They prepare the ground for insight by removing resistance at its earliest stage. And because these moments are so small, they require a refined sensitivity. You must learn to feel not just the noise, but the space behind the noise, not just the arising of thought, but the moment it weakens, not just the breath, but the natural rest between exhale and inhale. The closer you get to these transitions, the more you begin to live inside them. Awareness stops identifying with the contents of experience and starts resting in the transitions between them. This is where the practice matures. You are no longer trying to create peace. You are recognizing its natural movement. You are letting the mind move toward less, not more. And in that reduction, there is stability. The less you feed, the steadier it becomes. The less you analyze, the clearer you see. You can support this process by training the mind to notice subtle shifts. When sitting in meditation, instead of focusing on sensations as fixed points, notice how they change, how tension rises and falls, how breath expands and softens, how thoughts emerge and fade. Train awareness to rest in the fading, not to chase it, but to witness it. This trains the mind to prefer stillness over movement, not because it should, but because it recognizes the beauty of simplicity. This preference begins to show up outside of formal practice. You find yourself pausing before answering, listening without preparing a response, breathing without needing to adjust. These are signs that anuloma is working. The mind is slowly letting go of its need to manage every detail. At night, this becomes especially powerful. As you lie in bed, you can feel the edge where thought wants to return, where the mind usually begins its search, planning, remembering, judging. In that moment, instead of following, just feel. Where is the momentum going? Is the mind moving towards stillness or towards selfing? And if stillness is present, however briefly, do not disturb it. Do not analyze it. Let it settle. You may find that thoughts begin to fade before fully forming, that the breath becomes light, almost transparent, that sensations no longer demand labels. This is not sleep yet. This is something deeper. The body preparing to dissolve into rest, the mind aligning with the nature of letting go. You are not pushing anything. You are simply not resisting. This function also teaches you that transformation does not always require clarity in the moment. Sometimes, the most important shifts are only recognized in hindsight. You wake up feeling more rested. You move through the day with less grasping. You meet discomfort with less drama. These changes were not decided. They arose from the current you aligned with the night before. This is how deep change happens, not in declarations, but in direction. Not through control, but through alignment. And Anuloma Kika reminds you that the path of peace is not far. It is near. It begins in each moment you let go just a little earlier. Each time you trust just a little more. Each time you remain just a little longer in the space between. Eventually, you begin to trust this process so deeply that you stop needing to name it. You feel when the current is moving. You feel when the self begins to reform. And you choose again, not with willpower, but with intimacy. You choose stillness, not because you are told to, but because it has become your nature. And in that choice, sleep no longer becomes something you enter. It becomes something you fall into as a continuation of the release you've already begun. A falling not into darkness, but into alignment. Once you begin to feel the mind aligning with release, when even brief pauses in thought begin to carry a sense of peace rather than emptiness, you start to recognize that what truly supports the path is not just momentary stillness, but deep inner qualities that can hold that stillness. The momentum toward letting go must be supported by something stable within you, something that does not collapse the moment discomfort arises or emotions surface. To sustain this subtle unfolding, the heart needs strength, not through control, but through cultivation. This is where the 10 parami, the 10 perfections, become essential, not as abstract virtues, but as internal energies you can invite into your awareness each night before sleep. These 10 perfections are timeless qualities: generosity, virtue, renunciation, wisdom, energy, patience, truth, determination, loving kindness, and equanimity. They are not ideals to chase, but living energies within the heart. The Buddha himself is said to have perfected these over many lifetimes to prepare for awakening. They form the foundation not only of progress, but of balance. They guide the mind not toward effort, but toward wholeness. When you lie down at night, allowing these qualities to fill your awareness can turn the final moments of the day into sacred ground. The practice begins with intention. Before the body rests, the mind shifts gently into recollection, not as memory, but as embodiment. You don't just think about generosity, you feel it. You become it. Each parami is visualized, not as a concept, but as a moment fully lived. You allow yourself to enact the essence of each one in your imagination, like stepping into a role, not for performance, but for transformation. You begin with generosity. The mind recalls an act of giving, not only material, but emotional. You feel what it's like to offer without expecting anything, to give something with complete sincerity. Visualize the act as vividly as possible, your hands offering something needed, your heart open, the other receiving with ease. Let the feeling of spaciousness grow. You are not clinging, you are not hoarding, you are free. Let this sense of inner abundance remain as a quiet echo. Next, you shift to virtue, but not as a list of rules. Virtue here is the inner integrity that keeps the mind clean. You visualize yourself making a choice that preserves clarity, that avoids harm, that honors boundaries. It may be something simple, speaking honestly, refusing to retaliate, turning away from impulse. You see yourself choosing what uplifts instead of what reacts. Let this visualization be grounded, not idealized. See the strength in restraint. Let the mind rest in the relief that comes from being whole. Then, renunciation. This is often misunderstood as loss. But renunciation in the parami sense is the joy of simplicity, the power of letting go willingly. You visualize yourself placing down a burden, something you don't need to carry. It might be a possession, a relationship dynamic, a craving. You see yourself stepping away from it, not with sadness, but with freedom. The weight lifts, the breath deepens. You feel the spaciousness that comes from needing nothing. Rest in that simplicity. With wisdom, the mind turns toward clear seeing. You visualize yourself in a situation that once confused you, but now you meet it with understanding. You see through the illusion. You know what's arising is conditioned. You do not react. There is no judgment, only clarity. Feel this as a moment of internal light cutting through fog. Let the mind rest in the insight that truth does not need to be defended. It only needs to be seen. Then energy, not physical effort, but steady persistence. You visualize yourself not giving up, meeting difficulty with quiet resolve, not pushing, not forcing, but continuing. Maybe it's in practice, in a hard conversation, or in enduring discomfort. You see yourself remain. You feel that strength, not tense, not aggressive, but unwavering. Let this image settle in the body as quiet power. Now, patience. You let the mind return to a moment of waiting, not anxious waiting, but acceptance. You visualize sitting with a feeling that hasn't resolved, a person who hasn't changed, a situation that remains uncertain, and you remain with it. Not because you approve of it, but because you are not trying to escape it. You see the strength in not needing control. Let this patience soften the breath, open the heart. Truth follows. This is not only speaking truth, it is being truth. You visualize yourself saying something that is deeply honest, even when it's vulnerable. You speak with clarity, not to win, but to reveal. You see that truth is not sharp, it is steady. You feel the stability of a mind that no longer hides. You let that steadiness remain as a tone in the body, a quiet alignment. Next is determination. This parami is not stubbornness. It is the inner commitment to keep walking even when the path is unclear. You visualize a moment where you recommit, not out of pressure, but from clarity. You see yourself meeting fear or resistance and continuing anyway. You feel the strength that does not come from certainty, but from remembering why you began. Let this remembrance deepen your confidence without hardening the heart. Then, loving kindness, not sentimental, but unwavering goodwill. You visualize someone in front of you, someone you care for, someone neutral, someone difficult. You see them clearly, and you wish for their safety, for their peace, for their freedom, not to change them, but because your heart can hold them. You feel the soft warmth of this intention. It spreads through your chest. You are no longer bound by liking or disliking. You simply care. Let this care spread, without force, into the whole body. And finally, equanimity. You visualize yourself standing in the middle of joy and sorrow, gain and loss, praise and blame, and you remain balanced, not distant but steady. You feel the ability to witness without collapsing, to care without clinging. You know that all things change and that knowing is not cold, it is peace. Let this inner balance become the final resting place of the mind. As each parami is visualized, the heart begins to feel whole, not perfect, not complete, but aligned. These qualities are not ideals you must live up to. They are reflections of the mind's potential when not disturbed. When you invoke them before sleep, you are not performing, you are returning. And the effect is immediate. The mind becomes less noisy, because it is no longer fragmented, less grasping, because it feels full, less anxious, because it remembers its own strength. Each visualization becomes a cleansing, a soft gathering of scattered energy, a quiet reminder of what truly matters. You don't need long. Just a few minutes with each is enough. You can choose one each night, or allow the mind to rest on the ones that feel most alive. The point is not completion, it is connection. The heart that remembers generosity, truth, or patience, even for a moment, falls asleep with more peace than a mind busy with plans. And when these qualities are felt regularly, they begin to shape the inner world. The patterns of reaction soften. The sense of lack begins to dissolve. You stop trying to fix yourself. You start aligning with what was always true. The parami are not only supports for sleep, they are the architecture of peace. When practiced in stillness, they rebuild the foundation the world may have worn down during the day. You wake with more space, more kindness, more resolve. So each night, just before the body releases into sleep, let the mind bow, not with formality, but with sincerity, to these 10 qualities. Let each one speak through you, move through you, reshape you. And when the last one fades, and no more words are needed, let the heart rest in the silence it helped create. Not because the day is over, but because the path continues, even in dreams, even in rest, even in the breath that leads you into the next moment of letting go. After more than 3 hours together, you've journeyed through teachings rarely explored this deeply outside of monasteries. Insights that have been quietly passed down for centuries, not to impress the intellect, but to free the heart. You've learned to release the grip of time, to observe thought without becoming it, to meet restlessness with equanimity, and to fold even the smallest gestures into sacred ritual. You've witnessed the body dissolve into calapas, heard the hum of inner silence, and discovered that liberation is not distant. It's found in micro moments of letting go. You've touched the earth for grounding, invoked perfections for wholeness, and gently surrendered identity at the edge of sleep. This wasn't just a list of techniques. It was a shift in how you relate to your own mind. And maybe, just maybe, tonight you'll fall asleep, not because you forced yourself into rest, but because there's simply nothing left to hold. Now it's your turn to reflect. Which practice resonated most with you tonight? Leave a comment below, not just to share, but to anchor your intention. Let your words be your way of planting mindfulness into the collective space we've built together. And if this journey spoke to something deeper in you, if you'd like to keep walking this path of stillness, clarity, and wisdom, subscribe to the channel. One click, and we'll keep walking together, one breath at a time. Until then, may your nights be quiet, your heart be light, and your awareness remain your most trusted refuge.